Dr. David Walton, welcome to the show.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me on, man. Good to be with you.
Of course, really looking forward to getting to talk shop with you.
We got a lot to talk about, brother. We got a lot of stuff to cover here. Lots of questions.
Absolutely. It's been a long time in the making, too. I feel like this is long overdue.
It's inevitable.
For sure. So we'll kind of do a little bit of an interview style to start out, and then towards the end, we'll go into kind of a part two. It's probably going to be posted all as one, but we'll get into some questions that I received from some of my followers on Instagram. So
yeah, let's do it.
Let's kick it off with a little bit of a brief history of your military career, kind of starting with right before what made you actually decide to pursue the military.
Yeah, so it's a long history, right? You got to remember, I'm pre-internet, man. I was around before the internet was a thing. I didn't even have email as a lieutenant. So I'm a normal middle class kid. Grew up. My parents married for 50 years. My father was he's retired now. He was a chemical engineer for DuPont. We lived overseas growing up. I got a brother and a sister. Pretty normal childhood. I did all the normal things, played sports and got less than average grades. And I remember it was my senior. The military was not really the thing I was going to do. My grandfather served in the Navy, distinguished. My father didn't serve. I don't have any brothers or uncles that did anything. And I remember I went into my high school counselor's guidance office. And I only met my high school guidance counselor one time. This was the one time I went in, and she sat me down and she said, "So what service are you going to join?" Like, there was no discussion of like, "Do you want to go to college? What do you want to do?" And I was like insulted. I was like, that's all I can do. And we had taken, you remember in high school, you took those career placement tests. You had to like fill out all the bubbles and would ask you, and it would tell you, here's what we think you should do is your job. And my results came back as you need to work with your hands and work outside. And the suggestion was a commercial painter. I was like, what? So I was like, okay, screw this. I'm going to college because you thought I couldn't go, and I'm going to go, but I still kind of want to do something outside. So I chose environmental studies as my major. So I go off to college. I meet my wife in my sophomore year, and her uncle is a professor of military science in the ROTC department, and my grades are atrocious. My freshman year of college, I had a 1.6 GPA. Mind you, I'm a doctor now, so I'm not an idiot, but I had a 1.6 GPA, and I said, I got to get some easy grades. I'm going to take ROTC because I heard it's guaranteed an A. I joined it immediately. I was like, oh man, this is awesome. This speaks to me in all the things that I want to do. So I started ROTC, and I went off to basic training. I enlisted in the reserves. This is 1991 time frame, so middle of the Gulf War.
I was 2 years old.
Yeah, I know. I told you I'm old, but this is ancient history. And so I was actually in MEPS when we were crossing the berm into Iraq. So I was like, I'm going to go in there and get in there. And so I joined the reserves. I didn't go to the war. I didn't go to basic training until that summer. The Gulf was essentially over. And I ended up getting my commission. I got active duty. I was an armor guy. I went to the 1st Cavalry Division and was living the dream. It was a great first assignment. Spent all my time in the field, just lived in the field. I was a rifle platoon leader, a tank platoon leader, and a scout platoon leader. So 3 straight years on the line. And all my platoon sergeants kept telling me, all my NCOs kept telling me, hey, this is not normal. You're not going to get to go to the field all the time. You're not going to get to do gunnery. You're not going to get to do all the school guy stuff, NTC rotations and whatnot. There's a lot of downtime. So if you want to do something cool, if you want to keep doing this cool tactical stuff, you got to do something else. So I was looking elsewhere. And in the armor community, elsewhere back then I think it was 373 Cav here at Bragg, and they were they had the Sheridans, and they were the Shillelagh missiles, and that was like the next thing. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to go do that. I knew in the back of my mind I wanted to go do special operations, but I didn't know what that meant. Again, there's no internet. There was no resources. You didn't know what you didn't know. And I said, I'm going to go to the 82nd and go do this airborne tank thing. It gets me close to Bragg. Bragg is, I think, the center of the universe. I think that's where all that soft stuff goes on, but I don't know. So I'm going to try that. And then one day they announced that they were mothballing the it was called the Armored Gun System. It was the replacement for the Sheridan. And I was like, well, screw that. I don't know what to do now. I'm going to go SF. So I went to, and I think like that day or that week, I got the letter from the recruiter that said, hey, you come to this Special Forces briefing. Oh, okay, I don't know what that is. I'm going to go. 6 months later, here I am. I'm at Bragg going to selection. So I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to prep. I had no idea what Special Forces was. I just knew it wasn't what I was doing, and it was something commando related. So I was like, let's go. And I always felt that calling to serve. Like I always felt, I mean, back in the day, everyone loved America. Like it was a noble calling to go serve. It was a normal thing. But special operations was shadowy and no one knew about it. And it just, so it wasn't like a thing you could go on Reddit and research and figure out how am I going to go do this thing. It was just a thing that existed and you might stumble into it somehow. So I literally stumbled into it. I get to the Q course. I go through. I ended up being in getting assigned to 7th Special Forces Group. I had already. So when I was growing up, I lived in Brazil as a kid. So I had exposure to Spanish. My father's a native speaker in Spanish. The whitest gringo you can imagine, but he's a native Spanish speaker. So being multilingual in my house was normal. I took Spanish in high school and all that. So it was in the Q course, and I was like, man, I want to get to 7th Group. I really want to stay here at Bragg. That's back when 7th Group was here. And this is like 2000 time frame, 1999, 2000, when I was in the Q course. And the word on the street was, on the GWAT wasn't even a twinkle in our eye. It was the 2000. The year 2000 is the year of the CIB in Colombia. We're going to be getting after some narco traffickers down there. That's where the action is. So all the top guys were putting in. You wanted 110 because that got you to Stuttgart. You wanted 1-1 because it got you to Okinawa, and then you wanted 7th Group because 7th Group was doing counter drug, and counter drug was the cool mission. So I went and took the language DLPT, and I scored like a 0+0+ or something like that. It was like Yo Quiero Taco Bell was all I could say. But I got a rating, and they were like, we're going to reinforce the success. We're going to sign you to 7th Group. Totally shamed my way into that deal. Got to 7th Group, did my team time. Was on a dive team. Amazing experience, great NCOs. We'll talk more about that. Some of those great questions from your readers, and I want to draw back on that because it's really had me thinking a lot lately about sort of my formative experiences in Special Forces. And did my team time, did operations officer time at the battalion level, and then left. I went and did a tour in Joint Task Force Bravo down in Sotocano, where I was the chief for counter-narco-terrorism for Southcom. Then I went to JSOC. I did my mid-career at JSOC. I got multiple deployments and all that business. And that put me at I was like 16 years in. I left JSOC. I went to SWCC, where I did advanced skills for a little while. And then my final sunset tours. I was getting out. I knew I wanted to get out. Getting closing in on my 20, and I got pulled in to do education, regional studies, and human dynamics, which none of that really existed. We had a regional studies department, but human dynamics and education didn't exist. So I created those programs, and in that process, had to get smart. Remember, I told you, let's go back here. I had a 1.6 GPA my freshman year, and now this commanding general of SWCC says, you're in charge of education programs for all of Army Special Operations. I'm like, brother, I'm a dunce, man. Like, I'm the last dude you want doing this. And he was like, got to get smart. So, okay, I went off and got my doctorate. So I was earning my doctorate while I was on active duty. And in that process, I was learning like strategic planning and curriculum design and development and formative assessments and all that academic-y nerd stuff that I now is my bread and butter. And I was learning that and putting it into practice every day on the job. And in that little cycle of getting assigned all these extra tasks and creating these directorates and divisions and getting all that organized, SWCC assigned SFAS to me. Back then, SFAS was a homeless entity, didn't belong anywhere. And because I was running the human dynamics department, created that thing out of whole cloth. They said, hey, selection now belongs to you. So I owned selection for quite a few years. And that was right when we were doing the curriculum design and development for all of SWCC. And I was getting my doctorate in curriculum design and development and strategic planning and higher education, all that business. So it was this weird sort of vortex of requirement for the job and requirement for my doctorate. And so I was deeply, deeply studying selection. So that's kind of where I got my foot in the door for the academic study of it. And then I retired. I retired from active duty in 2013 and went into academia. I got a job as a professor of national security affairs at SWCC. I was working for the National Defense University, running the master's program at SWCC. And in that process, got to be exposed to any research topic that any soft guy that was writing his thesis wanted to talk about. Selection was a constant topic, PTSD, human performance, you name it, all that stuff. So I have a really wide research portfolio, but I also had continued to study selection in that process. Wrote several articles on it. It's funny. I ran into a guy on Compound last week, and he said, "Hey, I'm at Duke and I'm getting my master's, and I ran across one of your papers. I'm using it as a citation in one of my thesis papers." I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool, man! I wasn't just bullshitting when I made all that stuff up." So now I'm getting cited by soft guys. So and that led me to where I am now. And I guess we'll pause and talk a little bit about Reddit in a little bit here. But diving into the online world of discussing selection and selection prep was a very slow and painful process. So where I am, where you are today, is probably born of that same frustration of nobody knows what the hell is going on. Let's start telling the truth. And so that's where we are today. It was a long journey getting there. That's my history. And so I was not bred or groomed to be this expert in selection. I stumbled my way through it. But because of that, because like you, I'm a little hard-headed, right? Like I hate being wrong. I love being right, but I really hate being wrong. So when somebody asks me a question, I really dive deep to get the answer. And I want it to be, evidence-based, factual, not just anecdotal, not just my personal experience. I want it to be, much more transferable. And that's one of the things that most guys in OFF and SF in particular don't do, is they have their own personal experience. And from that, they derive this long list of, this is the way the world is. And it's like, that's the way your world is. That's not necessarily the way the world is. So what I'm trying to do in my work is say, this is the way the world is. It is not absent of my very strong opinion on many things, but I try to be as evidence-based as I can. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. I can relate actually to several things in there. You mentioned your family didn't really have a history of serving. Mine didn't either. My grandfather, my dad's dad, was a Marine in World War II, but he never once talked about it.
Yeah,
he's passed away since then. But basically, for my entire family, joining the military was super foreign. And when I decided to join, like, most people had never even heard of a Green Beret. Obviously, I took a different route than you did. But yeah, kind of crazy how that stuff works out, as well as I can also relate to the underachieving academically. I wasn't quite that low in high school. Like, I usually got B's, maybe A minuses, just because I, did enough that to actually get by, but really didn't really apply myself, at least not compared to my athletics and other things in life. But for those who have listened before, they've probably heard me talk about my not very successful college attempts, and that's what kind of like led me into joining as an X-ray. So super interesting stuff. And yeah, we'll definitely get into Reddit here in a bit, because that's definitely your bread and butter.
Yeah.
And most people know you for that. But let's talk about a little bit of throughout your career. I think a lot of people, especially people who have not gotten to where they want to go yet, aspiring Green Berets or aspiring Special Forces, whatever branch you kind of are going for. A lot of them, at least I did when I was coming in, kind of have an idea that we are very invaluable and we don't go through any struggles and we kind of are just like superhuman. But I like to remind people that we're just dudes and we're just guys like anyone else. So I think it's important to kind of give some people some perspective on some of the potential failures, trials, and tribulations. I remember reading the other day, actually, a recent comment about your Ranger School kind of fiasco. So
yeah,
if you want to get into like one or two,
let's talk about it, man.
That you failed and kind of overcame.
That's a great point, man. Yeah, it's. I think people have to remember that what we present, what we guys like you and me, influencers or experts or whatever, we curate what we put out there. So I don't post the days that we're like, I had a cramp and I couldn't finish the ruck, I only post my good 5x5 times. Like, so let's be clear about that. It's very curated, and that can give you a false sense of reality. We all struggled. I struggled immensely. It took me 3 times to go to Ranger School. I went to I've been to Ranger School so many times. I think I got a PCS award when I finally graduated. So I went to Ranger School right after the officer basic course as a young lieutenant, as an armor guy, and hurt my back badly. Didn't make it. Left, went off to the first Cav for my first assignment, and always had that chip on my shoulder. Was pissed that I didn't get it, and it really, really bothered me. I go to selection, first time through, struggled like everybody. Like here's the other thing people think, like I hate when guys go, oh man, selection wasn't that hard. Like it was, just don't quit. It's no big deal. Brother, selection kicked me square in the nuts for 21 days. I thought I was going to die damn near every day. It was brutal. I mean, it was really, really hard. Selection is designed to put you in the worst possible environment under the worst conditions and then assess you. So anybody that says I didn't struggle at selection is a liar. I am stunned to this day that I made it through. So I struggled. I went off to the officer advanced course as a young captain down at Benning, and I went to Ranger School again and failed. I ended up getting viral pneumonia in the mountains. So I went in, got sick, I was in the gulag for like 6 weeks. I was in the gulag during best ranger competition. So everyone who knows, that's like the worst possible time to go. It's like it's the extended gulag stay. Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, I painted every damn door on the compound black and gold because that's what you did as a recycle in the gulag. So struggled there, and then eventually left there, got to the mountains, and got viral pneumonia, and I was sick as a dog. And I remember the PA up in the mountains was a prior 18 Delta. And he was like, hey, I'm going to hook you up, brother. He's like, I really like you. He's like, you're really, really sick. I should be putting you in quarantine and locking you down, but I'm going to get you back to Benning, back to your wife, and we're going to get you out of here. So he had the staff duty driver throw me in the back of the van and drove me back to Benning before anybody knew what was going on. And I left Benning again without my Ranger tab. Chip on my shoulder, shaved head, looking like an idiot, and just pissed at the world. I go to the Q course. Did very, very well at the Q course, was on the commandant's list, crushed the small unit tactics. I mean, Christ, I'd been to Ranger School twice at that point, so it was no big deal. Went through, but struggled, just like everybody else. It was hard. The trek was really hard. Robin Sage was hard, but I made it. And I went to Ranger School again the third time. And this was like do or die. My wife was like, I'm not shaving your head one more time. Like, you either, come home on your shield or carrying it, because this is sort of your last shot. And my career timeline was such that I had to shit or get off the pot. Like I had to get my team time in order to get OERs into this system, in order to get promoted. Like I was at risk for promotion at that point. I was in school from the time I went to selection to the time I showed up to my ODA. It was a 3-year break as a student. So it was like, man, we're getting really towards the end of the window here. And I went to Ranger School, did well. Obviously, so when you go to Ranger School as an already tabbed SF guy, like you're a little bit of a celebrity. Like people are like, oh, that dude's a Green Beret. Like he's good. So you get treated a little bit differently by your peers. But there's also a performance expectation that you're not going to be a fuck up, and you're gonna help guys out, and you're gonna help them plan patrols and do route planning and all that business. So
permanent alpha team leader is my experience.
Permanent, yeah. Like you're planning the routes, go. I actually tell a story about that in the new book about I eventually, by the time I got to the mountain phase for like the 19th time on my third go, I actually got fired. The first sergeant wouldn't allow me to plan routes anymore because guys were like, oh, give it to Wally. He'll do it. Like Ranger Walton's squared away. He's a Green Beret. He'll do it. So I got to Ranger School for the third time, and it was in Florida phase. I got bit by a snake. True story. Got bit by a snake in Florida phase and got medevaced. And there's a great story about how it happened. But I remember I got medevaced out, and I was in the ER within 20 minutes of the snake bite. They had me medevaced out of the field into the ER, and it just so happened that the battalion and the RTB, the brigade commander, were on the objective when I got bit by the snake. So they immediately meet me at the hospital, and I'm all doped up. I've been, I'm literally naked. They cut your clothes off you. They get an IV in. They start the protocols. They give me the antivenom test, which I ended up testing. I had a negative reaction to. I could not take the antivenom. So they gave me a bunch of pain meds. So here I am. I'm laying in the hospital. 30 minutes ago, I was Ranger student on the objective, living a horrible life. And now I'm naked on the gurney, surrounded. This is down at Eglin, so it's surrounded by all the Air Force people. And they're looking at me like, oh my God, this kid's going to die. He stinks. All I can smell is ammonia because his body's burning itself. And I'm high as a kite because they give me some pain meds. And in walks the Ranger Brigade and Battalion Commander. And they're like, Ranger Walton, we're going to take good care of you and all this. And I'm loopy as could be. And I know in the back of my mind, I'm going, I cannot recycle. I gotta graduate. I gotta get to group. Like I'm out of time. And I told the commander, I slurred it out. I said, hey sir, whatever happens, do not recycle me. I know I've got 72 hours of training I can miss. I haven't missed any training yet. You got to give me a chance. Get me back out there. I'd already had my goes. I'd had all my patrols. All I had to do was literally show up. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, I cannot fail again. I cannot come back here for a fourth time. I'm 4 days away from graduating, and I got all my goes. I've been kicking ass. This is going to be horrible. And he goes, don't worry about it. Just get healthy. And I get in process. I go to the ICU. I spend 2.5 days in the ICU and no contact. Nobody is reaching out to me. Nobody's saying, hey, prepare to go back in training. And I'm watching the clock. I'm like, we're getting down to 68.5 hours. You're allowed to miss 72 hours. It's 68.5 hours. The chaplain literally kicks in the door. And Ranger School chaplains are not regular chaplains. They've all been they're all bat boys. They're all prior service killers. And he kicks in the door and he says, are you Ranger Walton? And I was like, yes, sir. He turns around to the nurse. He goes, unhook him. He's going with me. And I was like, whoa, what? What's going on? They whip out the catheter. He throws my boots at me. So I'm in jungle boots, a hospital gown, and zero clue what the fuck is going on. And he just walks out of the hospital. I'm following him. He's got his Humvee parked out front. He says, get in. I climb in the back of the Humvee in my hospital gown and boots. And he just drives, takes off. And I'm like, no one said a word to me. I'm like, okay, good. The clock stopped. I'm back. I guess I'm going back to training. Drives me out to the middle of the training area and stops the Jeep, the Humvee, turns around and says, get out and wait here. I hop out and he drives off. I'm like, what the hell just happened? I'm standing in the middle of the woods at Eglin in a hospital gown and boots, and my last instructions were wait here by the tree. About 10 minutes later, they do RI changeover. They come out and another Humvee pulls up and new RIs come out, and they're waiting for the old RIs to come from the patrol base and do the switch out. And the guy gets out and the RIs get out and he throws my rucksack at my feet, or my duffel bag. It was my emergency hurricane duffel with an extra uniform in it. He throws my duffel bag at my feet and says, get down with it. So I get down and I start doing pushes. Mind you, I've been bitten by a snake, so I have no strength in my arm. And I'm in a hospital gown with an open back. So I'm flopping on the ground. It's the most least graceful thing you could imagine. Pale, pasty, emaciated. You smell like shit. I'm flopping around on the ground with my ass in the air because my hospital gown is flopped open. I can't do push-ups. I'm a complete and utter shitbag. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm gonna fucking recycle Ranger School one more time. This is how it ends right here. Ass in the air, no tab, miserable human being. And they say after about 10 minutes of this flopping around in a pool of pity, he says, put your uniform on. I grab my uniform out of the bag. I put it on. He says, follow us. We go up to the patrol base, and I link back up with my platoon. And I'm like, I did it, man. I think I'm gonna make it. And I get up there, and they had made my platoon carry my rucksack. I guess the assumption was eventually he's going to link back up. So they had carried my rucksack for me. So I take my duffel bag and I stuff it into the rucksack. And they have rat fucked my chow. The platoon assumed I wasn't coming back, and they'd eaten all my MREs. So I had no food. I was like, but I wasn't pissed because when I was in the hospital, they had me on double rations because I was this emaciated Ranger student. So I was eating double hospital rations. And the nurses, these young Air Force nurses, had those Stouffer's French bread pizzas. They had them in the nurses station, and I ate them. I must have ate them out of $100 worth of those Stouffer French bread pizzas. Every 10 minutes, I was hitting the buzzer, And they come in and be like, hey, can I get one of those? Can I get one of those pizzas? So I was fat and dumb and happy after 2.5 days in the hospital. Met back up with my platoon. There's my ruck, no chow. I told them no big deal. I've been eating well. And I'm thinking all I got to do is ride this thing out. All I got to do is hang with the boys and get out of Ranger School. And we're forming up for the last mission. It's that road march to after Santa Rosa Island raid. You road march back in. It's a gimme. It's the patrol they give to the guys that they got to square away. There's a good dude. He needs a major go. They're going to make him the patrol leader and the assistant patrol leader for the road march back in. It's an easy go. We're going to square guys away. I'm thinking all I got to do is cradle my weapon in my arm and not quit. I'm good to go. And they call out the leadership positions, and they call me out as the weapons squad leader. Hey, you're the number 3 in charge. I'm like, all right, brother, I already got my goes. Like, I got all goes. I got major spot reports. This is some bullshit. Like, I don't know what this idea is. And the senior RI comes over to me and he says, hey, you know why they called your name? And I'm like, because they hate me. And he says, the expectation is that you're going to get these other 2 guys their goes. You're going to get the PL and the APL their go. And I was like, I can't use my arm, dickhead. Like, what do you expect me to do? So I spent that road march literally running fartleks up and down the line. You know, keep the interval. You know, 5 meters. Let's go, guys! Rah rah rah. Meanwhile, I'm just hanging on by a thread. So Ranger School for me was 2.5 complete and utter failures where I questioned everything about myself, my dedication, my physical preparation. I just thought it was just unobtainable, and it ended just like that. And I ended up being the honor graduate. I earned honor graduate, showed up to group fresh with my tab, and I remember the ultimate indignity. I show up to group 2 days out of Ranger School, so I'm anxious to get there, and I'm interviewing with my battalion commander. He's a former CAG guy. Just a complete badass, a great American. And he interviewed me. Hey, congratulations on Ranger School, blah, 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 blah. We're going to send you to this company, and we call your company commander. And he's on the phone. I'm sitting in the office. He's on the phone with my company commander, and he says to him, hey, Bill, I'm sending down Captain Walton here. He's going to be one of your new team leaders. Do this, do that. And then before he hangs up, he says to Bill, he says, make sure this dumbass grows his hair out because he looks like an idiot. Click. And I was like, oh, come on, man! You gotta give me a break here. I was in the hospital a week ago. So yeah. So listen, I struggled. We all struggled. Ranger School was a real challenge. I made it, but by the grace of God and perseverance and lots of opportunities. Not a lot of guys get a chance to go 3 times. I took advantages of the chances that I got. But your career in special operations is marked by failure. It is. I think that chip on our shoulder is what drives us a lot of the time. A lot of people think that Green Berets want to be Green Berets because they like to win, and I think it's the opposite. I think most of us, we like to win, yes, but we really hate to lose. Same way as I like being right, but I hate being wrong more than I like being right. I hate losing, so I want to choose. I want to pick the things that are the most challenging. I wanted to go to a dive team because combat dive is known as the hardest thing out there. It's one of probably the hardest single school in the Army, and it is hard. So I wanted that challenge. Send me to a dive team. I wanted, when you show up to a team, the expectation for a captain is that you're the weekend help, you're the summer help. Shut up, show up, don't get in the way. And I challenge my guys to say, I want to be the absolute best at everything that we do. So I don't think there's any such thing as NCO business and officer business. There is team business, and your job as an NCO is to train me on that stuff, and my job as an O is to push you to make everybody better. And that's what good teams do, I think. Hopefully we'll talk more about that dynamic in a little bit here. But so if you are the type of person like we are that seeks out these challenges, you will find failure. So you have to learn to deal with that. That's that's part of the process. That's part of the growth. And if you're in a world where you don't fail often, you're probably not challenging yourself appropriately. I pick goals every year that are as aspirational as you can imagine. 3 years ago, I said I'm going to write a book. 1.6 GPA, muddled through my academic career. That's why I got a doctorate, because I didn't like I wanted that challenge. I said, I want to write a book. And there, a year later, I published a book. It's done incredibly well. And I said, I'm going to publish 2. And so I published another one. And now I want to keep doing that. I want to create a reference library for aspiring candidates. And, so this podcast is an excellent example. This is a prime example. There are a billion podcasts out there. I'll bet you less than 5% ever record more than 20 or 30 episodes. I'll bet you it's less than 1% that lasts longer than a year.
Actually, you're pretty much spot on. It's 1% of podcasters make it past. I think it's episode 10. It might be 20, but it's
hard.
Something like that.
It is an immense burden and process, and like you have to stick to it. Like you have to have some determination. So we choose these hard things not because we want to be great, but because we are scared to death of being average. I would never accept that, and I've done that in every endeavor that I've ever chosen. I've done that. So if you're that kind of person, if you're the kind of person that seeks the soft lifestyle, you will experience failure. It's inevitable. It's incredibly valuable. You grow from that, but it creates some regrets. I have another big regret. Sort of a regret. I'll explain this. So back in the day, I was a young major, and the Ranger RRC, back then it was the RRD, the Ranger Reconnaissance Detachment. I think people know what this is. It's the Special Reconnaissance Detachment from the Ranger Regiment. And back in the day, it used to be an RRD. It was a detachment, and they were reorganizing it to a company, an RRC. And in that process, they were selecting its first company commander. And I was in JSOC at the time, and I was working with then the regimental commander, now General LaCamera, then Colonel LaCamera. And we were deployed together in Afghanistan, and I was doing some stuff for him. And he would query me on occasion, ask me these odd questions. Hey, what's your background? And how would you do this? And what do you think about that? And what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And so sort of over the course of several months, he's sort of feeling me out. I'm doing my regular job, and I have no idea where this is going. And then one day, it's probably by March. In Afghanistan, those who have been there in the winter in Afghanistan know that the weather socks you in for a lot of the time. A lot of missions get canceled. And we were sitting in the JOC one night, just kind of, watching the blank feeds. And he offered me the inaugural RRC commander's job. And I was like, and I don't have a Ranger Regiment background, but I was like, whoa, that's a pretty significant opportunity. But I had just come back to Bragg from Leavenworth for school, not for jail, and I just moved my family here, and I was just sort of coming to terms with how the second half of my career is going to play out, and I didn't want to move my family again. I would have had to move my family down to had I been selected, I had to go through the RASP and the board and all the business. But he offered me that opportunity. And I was like, I can't uproot my family again. I have to recognize that there's something else at play here. And I turned it down. And I that's the thing I regret. Not because I regret how things turned out. I would probably be divorced and I wouldn't know my kids because that's a pretty brutal lifestyle. But I regret not taking on that challenge because it would have been a real challenge. And about a year later, I was in Iraq. And I was talking with another SF guy who did have a Ranger Regiment background. He was an enlisted guy. He had jumped into Panama, had a mustard stain, came to SF, had a pretty good career in SF. And he actually he got invited after I did, and he went to RASP and did the interview and was at the final board. He was relaying this to me. He said they asked him at the final board. The last question they asked him was, if you get selected for this job, would you wear your Green Beret or the Tan Beret? And he it hadn't even dawned on him to think about that. And he was like, doesn't matter to me. I'll wear whatever the regiment wants me to wear. It's inconsequential. And that failed him. He didn't get the job because of that answer. And it was like, maybe how would I have answered that question? They certainly would have asked me that question. Would I have answered? Would I have gone through all that? Gotten my hopes up, putting all this turmoil on my family, and would I have answered that question incorrectly? And then I would have. Now you've got that hanging over your head. Like I failed because I couldn't commit to what color beret I was going to wear. Like, it's totally inconsequential. So I regret that, but that's a disappointment, and these are the things that you're going to deal with if you select a career of special operations. We do the hardest shit imaginable, so oftentimes there's going to be failure in there. So you just have to accept that. Mine was Ranger School. That was the last time I've ever failed at anything. So I allow myself one mistake a year every fiscal year, and the last 3 years I made 0 mistakes. So I got a pretty good record. So no, so you have to recognize that failure is part of the process. In fact, you should probably be programming some things into your prep so that you go to failure, so you like understand what that feels like and how to deal with that. And like you should be doing challenging shit all the time. So that's my story of career regret and failure. So
yeah, totally agree. I think you can definitely choose more of a cush path depending on kind of what your personality is. Even if you do go to SOF, there's a lot of different schools that you can either go to or maybe not go to.
Mm-hmm.
Ranger school, like honestly, most SF guys, once they get their SF tab, if they don't already have a Ranger tab, most cases they're not going to go, which I kind of disagree with. Obviously, I'm biased because I went after I got an SF tab, but I just think if you are not putting yourself, whether you're in SOF or pursuing SOF or not, just in life in general, there's plenty of opportunities to put yourself in a really uncomfortable situation that you might fail. In fact, usually if you do fail the first time, that's probably a good thing because you learn how to deal with it and you learn what you did wrong and how you can reattack it and go from there. I mean, I think that's what makes life worth living. It's what makes things fulfilling. And yeah, I think the only other option is just to be complacent and think that you've arrived and just be, okay, well, I'm just going to kind of coast through. And
I can't imagine. Let me ask you this. I can't imagine. I don't understand the guys that join the Army or the military for like admin jobs. Like I get it. There's hey, I gotta get out of my situation. I need benefits. I need college money. So I'm going to join. I'm going to be a 42 Alpha, or a 92 Yankee, a cook or whatever. I'm like, man, you could do that job anywhere. You don't have to put up with any of the bullshit formations and haircuts and all that business. Like, I joined the Army because I wanted to do like some weird, hard. I wanted to jump out of airplanes and rappel out of helicopters and crawl through the mud. So like in my mind, special operations is the logical conclusion to that process. Why would you ever join the military to do an admin job? No way. Why put up with all that shit? Like, I want to pick the hardest stuff possible. And Ranger School is one of them. I agree with you. I think every Green Beret ought to have his Ranger tab. I've written about this fairly often, and my views haven't changed. That I think it's essential. It is the world's premier small unit tactics school. And Green Berets, if nothing else, should be experts in small unit tactics. And the SUT phase of the Q course is not enough to get you there. You go to Ranger School. It's good for you. It's good for it's good for your career, and it's good for your soul. So I agree. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, definitely. So let's switch gears a little bit to a little bit of SFAS talk, as well as maybe tie in some Reddit to it.
Yeah.
Since most people that are listening are probably aware that there's a Reddit forum called Green Berets that you are the main guy in. You are the go-to, the SME. But honestly,
the lead shit talker.
Right, exactly. But also you provide a wealth of knowledge and help hundreds, if not thousands, by proxy of people in their prep for selection. That being said, you are definitely the world's leading expert on SFAS, and you know more than SFAS. You know more about SFAS than pretty much anyone in existence. These days, SFAS is not really any different than what it used to be. It's not much different than what it used to be. However, despite all the information available on open source out there, whether it's Reddit, social media, YouTube, whatever it may be, guys are still struggling. So in your opinion, / based on data that you've seen, what would you say the main, maybe 1 or 2 reasons, whether it's physical, psychological, or kind of a combination of both, what would you say the main reasons are that guys are still really struggling?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's put it in context. So selection is, like you said, it's essentially unchanged. It's the standards have not gotten harder or easier. The POI is essentially the same, but the numbers are down, and it's not insignificant. I pulled the stats here from my notes. we are required to produce so if you want to keep the regiment full, you want to have the correct rate, we have to produce 560 active duty enlisted every year. 560. In fiscal year 22, we missed that goal by 227, so by almost half. In fiscal year 23, we missed it by 247, so 20 more we lost. And in fiscal year 24, we're projected to lose by 265. So the numbers are getting worse. So what that equates to is that over the last 3 years, we have lost as many as 60 to 90 ODAs worth of guys. So that's 60 12-man ODAs, 90 8-man ODAs, if you math that out. So it is bad, man. It's unsustainable. We cannot sustain the regiment unless we get more guys selected. So it's a problem. However, how do you select more guys without lowering the standards? That's the other problem. And I'm not advocating for lowering the standards. Absolutely not. I think the standards are fine. I think that the issue is in the nuance. So let's talk about that. So it's not a lack of information. There is more information about selection available now than ever. I've literally written books on it. You can go SWIC has actually done a really good job. The Special Warfare Center has done a pretty good job over the last year, 2 years, like promoting the process of selection. This is what you need to do to show up. Here's here's the standards, but here's the performance expectations kind of thing. So it's not a lack of information. It may be too much information. It may be a little paralysis by analysis. Guys are just like, I have to consume all the information in order to be successful. And I am guilty of adding to that environment because I'm a producer of that information. I think, I was writing down the other day my goals for this year, and one of my goals is to encourage guys to stop overanalyzing things and just start fucking doing. Put a ruck on and go 100%. Out. Go touch grass, right? We got to get past that. And so once you start rucking, then you can start doing a little more research about like what it takes in all the business. So I think part of it is paralysis by analysis. There's so much information that guys get overwhelmed by it. But I also think that there's still a lot of bad information out there. So this adds to the paralysis problem, is that you can read an accurate source. I'll say my source is accurate. We'll make that assumption. So you read what I say about it, and then you then you go watch a YouTube video from a guy, and he says something different. It may not be the opposite, but it's just different than what I said. And now you think to yourself, okay, well, what's truth? What's the ground truth here? Is it really this or is it really that? So I think that sort of feeds to it. So my number one piece of advice to guys would be choose your experts wisely. Decide who you're going to listen to, and listen to them. And don't stop doubting, stop going back, stop analyzing. Just follow the plan. The other part about that is the cadre. I think that's contributing to it. And let me be very clear about my thoughts on this. You will find no greater supporter of the SWIC and the selection cadre than me. I helped shape many of those guys. I shaped the process. Those guys work for me. No one appreciates the predicament that they're in. They serve many, many masters. They first serve their company commander and sergeant major. By the way, Ben and Chewy, you could not pick two better dudes to be in charge of selection. Some of the great guys, great leaders, smart, articulate, thoughtful, couldn't pick better guys to be in charge of selection. So, but those cadres, they serve the company commander, sergeant major. They also serve the battalion commander, the group commander, the SWIC commander, the USASOC commander. So you've got all these officials that are fingers in the process, whether real or imagined, and then they also serve the regiment. They have to leave those jobs at SWIC and go back to group. And if they select a dude who is subpar and he gets to group and is a total fuck up, you're going to hear about it. You're going to get back to group and go, you didn't do your job, and here's the proof of it. The guy on the B team who spent 3 months on ODA and had to get relieved. That's your fault. So those guys have immense pressures on them, and I'm not certain that we prepare them for that. I think 99.9% of Green Berets are awesome dudes. They're good dudes, high character, high proficiency, all that stuff. But not every Green Beret makes a good assessor. Not every Green Beret makes a good Cadre member. Not everybody can be a good instructor in the Q course. But selection is unique in that you have to be a sort of a human dynamics expert, sort of like a junior untrained psychologist in many ways, plus a strength and conditioning coach, plus a performance enhancement specialist, plus a human relations expert, and a little bit fatherly. And then the guidance is you must remain entirely detached from the selection process. You have to be a robotic applier of the process. And that's a real challenge. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody should do that. So the challenge that Chewy and Ben have is to select the right guys to be assessors, and then teach, coach, mentor, and empower them along the way so those cadre can do what they do. And the cadre shall respond to the candidates. The candidates are the ones that set the tone. And for many, many years, particularly during COVID, but before that. So here's the stats. So the selection rates from 1988 to when selection started until about 2016 were historically about 40 to 45% selection rates. That's pretty high. Since 2016, it's been about 30 to 35%. Since 2022, it's been 20 to 25%. So think about that. That's almost half. That is not insignificant for such a low, we're a boutique industry. We're not wholesale. So those numbers are going down. They are going down, I think, because the candidate population has changed. They're less physically fit. I think we can all agree on that. The population-wide stats on that are clear. 70% of Americans are unfit to serve in the military. So we're fat, dumb, and lazy. So that's part of it. But then it was particularly pervasive during COVID that candidates were showing up and literally quitting, like showing up and not training at selection. So if you're charged as a cadre to be just a robotic applier of the process, disconnected from that process, like eventually you're going to say, I have to reconnect to the process because the candidates aren't fulfilling their social contract to train for whatever reason. And so Cadre responded. And one of the reasons why you see such a high failure rate in land nav is not because land nav is any harder. It's because they are ruthlessly applying the rules. The rule has always been no more than, you can't be closer than 50 meters to the road. And there was sort of a tacit agreement to that. And then you had started candidates that said, well, fuck it, I'll do 45 meters. I'll do 35 meters. I'll do 25 meters. Now Cadre, where it used to be a Cadre would catch you, they'd write your name down, and you might continue to train. Now it's like, hey man, we told you 50 meters. You weren't 50 meters. You're out. Immediately you're gone. We told you not to be further than arm's length away from your weapon or your ruck. Your weapon and your ruck are over there. You're out. So the rules haven't changed. The standards haven't changed. The Cadre have responded to the training environment because they feel that immense pressure. And I want to be clear, I support them in that. It's not sustainable long term, but you've got to course correct. So the Cadre are correcting the course. It's an aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to turn. They're turning it. They'll come back. They'll course correct. We've seen the numbers in the last two classes come back up. So so land nav has been the big one. Used to be about 25% of a class would fail land nav. Now it's at about 50%. So that's significant. And of course that matches the overall rates for selection. And I think it's because of, number one, guys don't train in land nav. Guys graduate OSIT having done 2 or 3 iterations. Land nav's not, you can't learn it 2 or 3 times. So I think that's part of it. And the other part is the Cadre applying, ruthlessly applying the rules. So I think the Cadre will course adjust. I think Ben and Chewy are smart enough to create an appropriate leadership environment where that can occur organically. It has to be organic. You can't force it. The SWIC CG cannot come down and say, you will now select 50%, because you'll lose the room immediately. So again, the August class, after the break, they readjusted. They added the extra week to land nav to address this. That's part of it. But that first class back after the summer break still had like a 25% selection rate. The last class, the class that just graduated about a couple weeks ago, had I think a 31% selection rate. So climbing back up. It's getting back to normal. You can't determine a trend off of 2 classes. So let's let a couple classes go through. I think we'll know by the spring. By the time we take the summer break, so that last May June class, we'll have 4 or 5 classes of data. I think we'll be able to determine where we're trending. But that's the problem. The problem is the cadre are subject to the whims of many, and the candidates are coming less prepared. Eventually, they'll figure it out. I made a bold prediction a couple months ago. I said within a year we'll be back to the historic selection levels, and nothing will have changed. We'll have not changed any standards, but it sort of finds a way of settling out. So if you're like me, you've studied the history of selection, you know that it goes through these cycles of higher and lower selection rates and meddling with the process. We did it during the surge where the Major General Parker, he was the SWIC CG, said, we're going to double our output overnight, and you're not getting any additional resources and no extra time. It's like, okay, we know that's not going to happen. And the cadre, we damn near broke the system. We didn't get any higher selection rates, not sustained. So we know that no matter how much people monkey with SWIC, I'll say SWIC because it's the whole process, no matter how much you monkey with it, you're only going to get within a specific band of selection rates. Doesn't matter what you do, unless you scrap the whole thing and completely change the standards, you're not going to get a significant change. So 20% is at the low end of that band of excellence. Let's get it back up to 36. That's a little more comfortable, a little more sustainable. Still not at our 560 active duty enlisted guys a year production rate, but it's certainly sustainable. So we can manipulate it more from there. So that's what I think the problem is right now with SWIC. I don't think it's a system does what a system is designed to do. And the selection system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It was designed to be a high barrier to entry to select guys that were going to be successful in the Q course. And the Q course selection rates Q course graduation rates haven't changed significantly. So we know we're still producing a good product. The question is that I think that we have to increase the quality of the candidates going in, and we have to create and foster an environment where cadre can execute the selection process free from outside influence. I think that's the answer. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my answer.
No, perfect. I totally agree with the whole paralysis by analysis thing. I think, honestly, like a lot of guys, especially with the land nav, like most people who fail land nav, maybe not most, but a good portion of guys who fail land nav, they could otherwise pass. Like they have the capabilities, they have the tools, they have the skills.
It's not a skills issue.
Right. They just don't have the between the ears thing to kind of focus on the task at hand and actually go execute. And that tends to get a lot of guys. And I think just, tying back to...
Well, let me jump in there. So I think land nav is there's three components to it. It's competence, skills, confidence, and discipline. And the skills are, the deal. Land nav skills are very basic. Count your paces, read the train. You can, there's some of it's repetition. You got to do it a couple times. But the skills are very, very basic. What gets guys out of selection is not land nav skills. It's confidence and discipline. Everybody knows. So I tell this story during my musters. I'll tell it here because I think it's exactly to your point. Everybody knows that you're not allowed to walk the roads at selection. Everybody knows this. The rule is 50 meters from the road. But guys walking on the roads happens so often that we have a name for it. They're called road kills. So did those road kills not know that they weren't allowed to be on the road? No, they knew. They lacked the discipline to stay the fuck off the roads. That's not a skills issue. That's not a confidence issue. That's a discipline issue. So I think that we have a different recruit population where they have not been held accountable to real standards. And then they show up at selection. It's like, we ain't changing the standards, dickhead. Get your shit together. And they show up and they're like, I was only 48 meters. Yeah, but the standard is 50. So now we're playing by Green Beret rules now, and those are the rules, and that's where guys struggle. So
yeah, totally agree. I think we'll switch gears a little bit into some Reddit stuff. So obviously you are very prolific on Reddit. I believe you're the main admin guy. I don't really know the term for it for the Green Beret subreddit. And I probably about a year and a half ago started to frequent that a little bit more. And as you know, there's a lot of very, very questionable things being done there. Guys want to improve. They want to learn. They want to kind of figure out where to start, where to go. But also anyone and their brother-in-law can go in there, whether they know anything about SFAS, whether they know anything about fitness, whatever it may be, they can go in there and kind of just say whatever they want. So how have you kind of gotten into that circle? What made that come about? And in your opinion, what would you say some of the main pros and cons of having that Reddit page are for guys who are like, truly, they really want to go do this. Like, they don't just want the title, they want the job, and they want to figure out kind of a good solid route to take to their career in SF. What would you say some of the upsides and downsides of that Reddit sub or subreddit are in your experience?
Yeah, let's talk about Reddit, man. It is a not insignificant problem. So again, most guys know what Reddit is. It's a forum, many subreddits on literally any topic you want. Whatever you're into, there's a bunch of other weirdos that are out there that are into it. So literally any topic you want. And I stumbled into Reddit years ago. Again, I'm older. I'm a pre-internet Green Beret. So I stumbled into it about 4, 5, 6 years ago. Because I needed something to do when we were having a hurricane. So I knew I was going to lose my cable. So I said, well, let me download this Reddit thing. My son was on it, and let me check it out. And I was actually on Reddit for about a year before I realized that there was a Green Beret or a Special Forces subreddit. I literally stumbled into it. And so let's understand the information environment. Reddit is social media. Social media is predominantly progressive in nature, and there are very few checks and balances for mis and disinformation. Because it's user-generated content, any user can generate the content. And the Green Beret subreddit used to be full of nothing but trash. It was literally dominated by guys that had not been selected, or guys that were angry at the world and had a chip on their shoulder and had a bone to pick about how fucked up selection and Green Berets were. So they were telling the story. They were establishing the narrative. And it was completely incorrect. And again, I don't care if you have a different opinion than me. Matter of fact, I value differing opinions. What I care about is that if it's not factual. And because of my experience, I'd owned selection, I'd helped redesign it, I wrote the POI, like all that stuff. Like, I knew the truth, and it would grind me. It was like, again, it's not that I like being right, it's that I hate things being wrong, and everything they were saying was wrong. And I was like, man, I can't. It hurts my soul to be involved in that. And so I started posting, and it was factual based, evidence based. There were sort of like mini articles, like where I'd cite sources and lay out the argument. Here's the evidence. Here's the truth. And I started gaining a following. Guys started recognizing, like, hey, this guy TF Voodoo, my screen name, which, by the way, my screen name means absolutely nothing. It was a randomly assigned Xbox gamer tag years ago. It means absolutely nothing, but now it's like the name of my company and it's my online persona. So guys started saying, hey, this guy TF Voodoo, and I was anonymous for many years. This guy knows what he's talking about. He posts this good stuff. Like he's got good advice. He seems measured, and he talks a lot of shit, but he seems to be based in some fact. And I was, guys would say for years, hey, you should become a moderator. That's the guys who run it. You should become a moderator. And I was like, man, brother, I cannot be trusted with that kind of authority. Like, my judgment is far too lacking to be in charge of this subreddit. And I want the credence and credibility of not being a moderator. I want to be just a guy in the community, and I'm another dude in the team room. And that's kind of the way I viewed the subreddit was. This is a team room. Dudes are going to come in. We're going to talk shit. We're going to argue about stuff, and we're going to make it happen. So that was sort of, I viewed that as my role. And it turned out that the mods, all of the mod team, there were 4 or 5 of them, none of them were Green Berets. They were just like random dudes that like started the sub. So I was like, boy, that's kind of a problem here. And my position in the community, in the team room, grew to a point where I was a de facto moderator, but I didn't have any control. I couldn't manipulate the posts so that the bad stuff, the incorrect stuff went away, and the good stuff got elevated. And in that time, there was an organic professionalization of the subreddit, where guys we would change the way we were reviewing things. It was no longer acceptable to go in and say it's Cadre roulette. Like, no, it's not Cadre roulette. Here are the things that determine, here's the performance metrics, all that business. So we had changed quite a bit, and I got. It was actually just this summer, just a few months ago, I got invited. I got another invite. They said, hey, you ought to be a moderator. And I knew that the other moderators were leaving, and they weren't Green Berets, and I said, "Here's an opportunity here. I'm already a de facto moderator. I might as well become a moderator." And so I accepted it, and I became a moderator just a few months ago. But in that process, I had to sort of set, just like you take over your company commander, write your command philosophy, and so everyone to share. So my moderator philosophy is just what I've described. I view it as a team room, that there's an atmosphere of accountability. You can say whatever you want, but you will be held to account for what you say. It has to be accurate information. It can be opinion based, but you have to say, "This is my opinion." And if you're gonna make a claim, you have to be able to cite that claim, whether that's anecdotal, your experience, or I heard from this guy, or here's the article I read, or here's the video. Like there has to be some follow through, and it has to be fun. Like it can't just be a counseling session with a retired 05 who's counseling some young 16-year-old, like, get your shit together. Like, there has to be an element of fun to it, which is exactly how a team room is. In a team room, you are held to account for what you do and what you say and how you interact. You're held to account for that. You got to show up. You got to do your job. You got to be good at it. You have to be accurate, and it's a ton of fun. There is a massive element of shit talking in a team room. Like, you have to learn how to get your balls busted, and you have to learn how to bust balls, because that's a human dynamic. Like, that's a real human emotion. Like, you have to be able to partake in that environment and survive. And what you see is, you go on there right now and you'll see guys that don't take criticism well, and they'll get fucking crushed. Like, dudes will just come after them. And the dudes that are legitimately asking for help, and now you see it now, guys will post and they'll say, like, they'll caveat their question with, I've read all Voodoo stuff, I checked all the links, I searched the sub and I couldn't find it. Now here's my question. And it's like, okay, so guys are responding now. So we have created this organic accountability vessel where guys can go and get accurate questions. And I have tried to promote guys that have accurate information. So if somebody asks me a question about, hey, how do I improve my 2-mile run time? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a 2-mile run expert. I got a guy who is, though. His name's Kevin Smith, Terminator Training. Like, you should ask him. He's got some great resources. Like, he's got 9,000 podcasts on specifically push up, pull up, and run progression. So go seek that information out. So I'm trying to promote those good things. And I'm also, one of the things that's interesting is, 2 years ago, you could not find a single post on the Green Beret subreddit about Zone 2 cardio. And now it's like every other post.
Every day.
And guys are like, oh, it's so boring. I'm like, man, that is a marker of the health of the information environment. The guys now realize the value of Zone 2. You could not pick a more boring, mundane, milquetoast topic than Zone 2 cardio, man. That will cure insomnia. It is boring as fuck. You could also not pick a topic that is more important than establishing baseline cardio. You cannot get fast unless you build baseline cardio. Like, you will not survive. It's important for recovery. It's important for the physiological adaptations, capillary structure, muscle structure, lactic threshold, all that stuff. It's all built on boring ass Zone 2 cardio. So
you're also gonna struggle as a Green Beret or any soft guy if you can't handle long periods of time of boredom.
Yes. Oh, 100%, man. That's our whole existence, right? That's every soldier's existence. So when I see those posts, I get the fizz. I'm like, oh man, like we're doing it. And then you'll get the post. What's the best boot? What's the best sock? Cool. The other thing I've realized over the last year or two is that not everyone's been on Reddit for 5 years like I have. So there are new guys that are coming in, and they are naturally going to ask the same questions. So I have on my phone here. So this is my subreddit access device. On my phone, I have a little note in the Notes app, and here's my note, and the note is titled "Use the Search Bar." There's the notes, and there's all the posts, all there, ready to be linked. And so when someone asks a question, I go there, I highlight that, I paste it in, go check this out. And I used to get pissed about it, like, you dumbass, like, you should search the subreddit, because they're new. They just got here. Like if a new guy walked into the team room and said, how do I do, where's the hand receipts at? I wouldn't say, you fucking idiot, like, get out of here. I would say, let me show you where the hand receipt book is, and here's how we've done it in the past. So I've taken that sort of take on it, is that I want to make it like a team room. You're going to get your balls busted. You're going to get great information. You're going to be introduced to the brotherhood about what our culture is. It's a culture of accountability. It's a culture of competence, and it's a culture of fun. So that's sort of my mod philosophy. And I'm proud to say I have full banning authority. I've only ever banned 3 guys, and they've been troll accounts, guys that are clearly not part of the community. I just banned a guy this morning. He's clearly a troll talking about running arthritis, and he's got a 1-month-old account and 300 posts on nothing but arthritis. So it's like, okay, that's clearly he's not involved in the brotherhood. So that's right. So I'd encourage you guys, come there, get a ton of information, not just from me or from you, but from guys that are like you, like young guys starting out, just starting the process. Where do I start? What questions do I ask? Like somebody help me. So I want to make it a resource for help. You're going to get your balls busted, but you're going to get helped as well. So that's Reddit.
Yeah, the community aspect I think is huge, especially today's day and age where it's kind of hard to be part of in-person communities. So, I mean, even though it's not quite as beneficial to be part of an online community, at least it's some sort of community aspect where you can bounce ideas off each other. You can see what other people struggle with. You can see what other people are doing well. And of course, you can learn great things from guys like you, Taylor Starch, myself, Steven, nutrition coach Steven, all putting out good, solid, actionable information. And of course, kind of like we discussed earlier, that information is important, but you got to also go and do. I always encourage guys to read it, gather the information, but even though you might feel like a nice little dopamine hit from making the decision to pursue it or telling other people that you're going to pursue it, those things are not the same as doing it. So you're going to actually have to go do it. It's the job versus the title thing, which I know you write about in your first book. It's like, do you want to have a Green Beret on your head every day, or do you want to actually go and freaking do the job, the ups, the downs, the hard parts, the easy parts? So totally agree with all that. I absolutely love going on Reddit and kind of seeing what guys are talking about, thinking about. And the zone 2 stuff is definitely, it's boring, but at the same time, like who would have ever thought that people are going to be posting a screenshot of their 10:30 10-mile run,
the most benign performance ever, and guys are like, I took. And here's the crazy thing: like if you watch those young guys that are just starting to post out, they'll say something like, I'm posting here for accountability, and they will post, and like 2 months later, having done almost nothing but zone 2, which is literally in Shut Up and Ruck, the prep program, and many of your prep programs are, there's 80% of the work is zone 2. Like it's not sexy, doesn't look good on Instagram, but just doing that zone 2 in 2 months, they're taking like 2 minutes off of a mile time. Man, that is massive performance gains, like unbelievable. So it's boring, but it works.
100%. I mean, if the professional runners are spending most of their time in zone 2, even though we shouldn't exactly emulate their training, it at least gives us a decent idea. Success leaves clues, and that would be a perfect example of it. You know, these guys who can run 445 miles, 426 miles in a row, guess what? They spend hours and hours and hours a week running double that pace.
Yeah.
Just easy runs. Of course, getting all those benefits of zone 2, but you can't just do everything super hard and super intense and expect to survive.
And brother, you and me, we're Clydesdales. We ain't Kenyans. So like we have to temper our enthusiasm a little bit. So
100%. Yeah. I think that's a pretty good wrap of the first part.
Sure.
If you want to get into some good, solid Q&As,
let's do it.
Let's go ahead and do that. All right. So part 2 is going to be more of a Q&A style discussion where I am going to go over a few questions that I got recently on my Instagram Ask Me Anything form. So appreciate the great questions. If I don't get to your question today, it does not mean it's a bad question or anything along those lines, but we're going to probably get to a good 4 or 5, maybe 6 solid ones and have good discussion on them, because I think these are really good learning opportunities for a lot of listeners. And you guys have heard me answer lots of very specific fitness questions on the show. So these questions are going to have some fitness aspect to them, but for the most part, they're going to be a little bit less fitness focused because fitness is just one part of the entire process. So of course you have to be a complete individual to be successful. So the first question is kind of a 2-part question. What separates guys that get selected versus guys that actually end up finishing the Q course? And then part 2 is what separates guys that finish the Q course from guys that actually thrive on an ODA. So I'll start with this one. I would say guys who get selected versus guys who actually finish the Q course, a lot of people do kind of underlook or underappreciate that once you get selected. And honestly, I kind of fell into this boat. I was like, okay, I got selected. Now I'm like pretty much good. And that is not the freaking case at all. I know for a little while, the Q course was a little bit easier to pass, but I believe it is now pretty easy to get dropped from the Q course because they are really cracking down on the standards. But I would say as a overarching topic, an overarching thought on this one, your ability to be very freaking consistent and your ability to withstand delayed gratification are probably the two biggest factors. The way I look at it is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but relatively speaking, it is easy to show up really fit for a 3-week event and put on a show, and potentially for some guys, which ends up happening, almost have some false bravado. Like, hey, I'm the guy, pick me, I'm going to crush it. And then maybe you do crush it. But guess what? If that is not actually your true display of who you are as a person and your actual approach, your physical approach or your psychological approach, or just who you are as a dude, then it's going to kind of rear its ugly head at some point in the Q course. So don't show up to selection thinking like, I got this. As soon as you get selected, hey, I just need to kind of show up and I can coast through the Q course, because that's not really the case. The Q course is, the hardest part of it is the sheer duration, regardless of your MOS. Obviously, if you're a Delta, a lot longer. And I always say the hardest part of being a Delta in the Q course is just the duration of it. There's no specific day or week or whatever that's like incredibly difficult, but it is freaking long and you have to show up and be very consistent. You don't have to be a superstar. You don't have to crush everyone in every physical event. You don't have to be the honor grad, your MOS. You don't have to go and crush SUT. Like, you just have to get through those things. And to get through them, you have to be consistent. You have to consistently show up, whether you're having a bad day, bad week, whether you don't feel like it, whether you feel like it, you have to show up and freaking perform. So that is a huge one. And then delayed gratification. This is huge for not just this, but also in your future as a Green Beret. There's going to be a lot of instances where you're just not going to get any real feedback. You're not going to get any real reward. You're not going to get any accolades. And the Q course is a great example of that, because from day one till the day before you graduate, you're not really going to get any good job buddies, way to go, pat on the backs, nothing. Of course, the major reward at the end is getting your Green Beret. But after that, then you have to show up and crush on your team. And today, it's very hard to be good and comfortable with accepting delayed gratification, because we live in a world of instant gratification, instant dopamine hits. I feel bored, so I'm going to scroll. I feel tired or stressed, I'm going to go to the fridge and eat, or I'm going to go to the fridge and grab a beer and drink. And you get that temporary relief where you feel better, but it's actually not helping you in the long term. It's actually probably prolonging your feelings. It's basically getting you used to not dealing with the way you feel or your current state, your current mood, which regardless are going to be fleeting. Some days you're going to feel good. Some days you're not going to feel good. Bad things happen. Good things happen. If you always react by kind of trying to fix it with a temporary hit or a temporary fix, you're going to really struggle in SFAS. You're going to struggle in especially the Q course as well as on the ODA. So being like the master of accepting delayed gratification and being okay with, I'm going to do this job right now, whatever it is today, as if I'm going to get rewarded, but you're not actually going to get rewarded, but you still need to actually go and smash it. As for the Q course versus on an ODA, it's honestly more of the same. And we've kind of already discussed this earlier on in the episode, but be willing to fuck up, be willing to do things that are going to challenge you, put you outside of your comfort zone, be willing to figure things out, ask questions, build relationships, and be okay with messing things up and kind of bouncing back and figuring out another way. Be willing to volunteer and go to schools. And, you know, if you show up as a new guy, an X-ray, and your team sergeant says, hey, do you want to go to Ranger school? There should be no like hesitation. You should be like, yes, when am I leaving? And you should, I talk about this all the time, but you should always be ready for things like that. When people ask me, how do I train up for Ranger school? Yes, some people do need to train up for Ranger school, but as a Green Beret, in my opinion, you should not have to train up for Ranger school. You should be ready to go smash it. That's just one example. Of course, dive school, is a different story. You're not always going to be ready for dive school unless you're like a former water polo player or a former collegiate swimmer. Even then, there's definitely a mental aspect that you have to get used to. But in general, things like that, ACFTs, Ranger School, or other schools like that, that maybe you get at a moment's notice and you have to go show up and perform, you should always be ready for that, because those opportunities are sometimes going to come at very short notice. And if you're not ready to go do them, or if you hesitate, or if you're not willing to volunteer and kind of sacrifice whatever you may have going on in your life, or sacrifice whatever you may have going on professionally for a period of time to go become a better soldier from whatever school it is, you're really going to struggle. And in my opinion, you're not really going to last all that long. So I would say those couple of things: be willing to fuck up, be willing to learn from your mistakes, accept delayed gratification, and be very, very consistent are the overarching principles in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. Consistency was number 2 on my list. You got to be consistent. You got to be reliable. Your teachers have to know what to expect from you. Your teammates have to know. So consistency is critical. My number one thing was humility. You got to be humble, and that's something that a lot of guys struggle with. I mean, it starts the moment you get selected. You're like, I am the world's greatest tactical athlete. I just passed selection, and we used to. So one of my duties when I was head of human dynamics was I used to brief every. So I was the last guy that would brief a selection class before they left, before they got released into the wild. And I would always tell them, hey, congratulations, you've done an amazing thing. Now swallow your fucking pride, because you haven't done shit. Do not go out on the town and, you're a 2-beer queer. You go out there and start drinking, you're going to be dead within an hour. Do not go out there and start talking junk. And don't go to Charlie Mike's and tell everyone you're a Green Beret now, because you ain't a Green Beret. You got to be humble. Like you have passed a very significant gate. You will never forget this for the rest of your life, but you ain't done shit yet. So stay humble. And when you get to your team, stay humble. So now your confidence and spikes again, because I just got my Green Beret. So now I'm showing up and I'm cock of the walk. And it's like, man, like, you don't know anything. You're the newest guy on the team, even particularly as the captain, when you're viewed as a different animal, not necessarily less, but certainly different. That you got to be humble. You got to come in there and, I don't know anything. Tell me what I need to know. Here's what you can expect from me. I'll be consistent. I'll never be late. I'll never be last. You'll never have to wait on me. If I have a question, I'll ask you all the time. And so number 1, humility. Number 2, consistency. Number 3 is trainability. You have to be infinitely trainable, moldable. You are a blank canvas, and you show up there and tell your team sergeant that you know exactly what you're doing. You're done, because that guy rules that room, especially for an officer. So you got to show up and you got to be trainable. And because a Green Beret he's a Renaissance man. He's a jack of all trades, man. Your ODA is going to get asked to do stuff that you are not prepared to do, and your answer is always going to be yes. Can you? 100%. I don't care what it is. You can do it. I used to piss my wife off. She'd ask me, hey, can you do? And before it was even out of her mouth, I go, yeah, whatever it is. I'll figure it out. I got YouTube, I got a phone, and I got a wicked toolbox. Like, whatever it is, I'll figure it out. I'll do it. You got to have that, man. You got to have that. You got to have that mindset. Like, I don't care what it is, I'll figure it out. And that is for every domain and every discipline, whether it's combat dive or free fall or unconventional warfare, or we want you to learn how to pack animal, how to tie a load onto a pack animal. You got to figure it out. So it's like, you got to be infinitely trainable. So you inherently have to be humble and say, I don't know what I don't know. Teach me what I need to know, and I'll figure it out. I think those are the keys to success. And the guys that don't do well, I remember we had a guy on my team. This will go back to our discussion about Ranger School. We had a guy on my team. He was an 18 Bravo. So 18 Bravos are supposed to be master tacticians. He came to the teams a little bit later. He was an E6. He was not Ranger qualified. He used to be a field artilleryman, and he showed up, and he was a Puerto Rican guy, native Spanish speaker. And my team sergeant was like a diehard. He came from the Ranger Regiment, was also an 18 Bravo, and was like, my 18 Bravos are going to be master tacticians. And this 18 Bravo had been on the team for about 4 hours, and he said. He said, I'm going to wait and see what the promotion points are before I decide if I go to, this is Tony Montana, this is Godfather. I'm going to decide whether, if I make the E7 list, I'm not going to go Ranger School because I don't need it for the points. And I was like, And you could have heard, like, it was a record scratch, like, holy shit. And my team sergeant just like looked around and said, "Hey, Captain, why don't you go to lunch? And me and the boys got some stuff to do." And I was like, "Roger that. I'm out of here. I'm gonna go to lunch." Like, there's an officer. I don't think there's such thing as officer in NCO business, but this is NCO business, man. I'm out. And I came back. I came back about 2 hours later. It was an officer lunch, so it was a 2-hour lunch. I came back, and that dude's shit was in the hallway, and my team sergeant was walking back down the hall, and he said, "Hey, Captain, pick whoever you want. We can replace him." And it was like, oh, like, that dude was gone in 2 hours. He didn't last 4 hours on the team because he was not humble. And he was like, "I'm only going to Ranger School if I need it for promotion." And he was like, and I talked to my team sergeant, said he counseled him. And the guy said, "Hey, listen, I know what I bring to the team. I'm a native Spanish speaker. I graduated the Q course. I'm older. Like I don't need Ranger School." And it was like, "Oh, brother. Like, that's the wrong attitude. Like, number one, yes, you do need Ranger School, but number two, you need a new attitude. Like, you are not going to survive here." So, like, he was not humble.
Which Ranger School could potentially help him with.
100%, right? There's one thing Ranger School does, it humbles you. And so he was gone. And so he wasn't trainable, wasn't humble. He was gone. He went to another ODA, every battalion's got it. They got that recycle ODA that everyone gets dumped to, and everyone knows who they are. And in my battalion, that's where he went, and he did as was expected, and no one knows his name, and no one remembers him, and he never made an impact. So congratulations. So if you want to do that, there's an ODA for you, and there's a B team, and there's a SIGDET, and there's something else. Like we'll figure out where to send you, but you got to be humble, you got to be consistent, and you got to be trainable. I think those are the big three.
Yeah, and your reputation follows you. Everybody, the bro Green Beret network is very widespread. So, if you show up and make a name for yourself in a negative way like that, your team is not going to be the only ones who know about it.
Everybody knows. The dudes that you interact with at selection are going to be dudes that you interact with 10 years from then.
100%. Yeah, I remember bumping into guys way down. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I went to selection with you, whether they're good dudes or not. But you always remember that stuff. And whether you build a great reputation or a poor one, it's very, very hard to come from behind and overcome whatever wrong foot you get started off on.
We will think of you what you make us think of you.
100%. All right, cool. Let's hop into the next question. This one is definitely in your wheelhouse. So, what are some techniques and procedures to reduce cognitive load during land navigation week at SFAS? Also, is there a method to handrail roads and bowling alleys at night that totally avoids being roadkill?
So
thanks again for the knowledge.
Yeah, great. That's a great question. That's one I get. My DMs are probably like your DMs. I get the same 90 questions, and it's just on a rotating cycle. So that's actually how I build my posts. Is when I get a confluence of questions in my DMs about the same topic, I shape an answer and I publish that as a post and write an article on it. So this is one that's in my wheelhouse right now, and it's interesting that it's about land nav. I hold in my hands right here, Kevin. This is the next TF Voodoo project. This is the next book. It's called Never Get Lost. It's a Green Beret's Guide to Land Navigation, and it will be available. This is the final edit. The edit's done. I'm waiting on the cover art to come back, but probably by the time this podcast is ready for publication, the book will be on Amazon. It's very good, and it covers exactly this type of stuff. Cognitive load is huge, and again, land nav is probably not a skills issue, although there is a skill component to it, but that just comes with practice. It's a discipline and confidence issue. So my number one piece of advice for managing cognitive load and getting good at land nav is practice, man. You gotta practice. It takes repetitions. Land nav is one of the few skills where you have to fail in order to succeed, because you have to learn how to get unlost. You have to learn, like, you're going to get disoriented. When you do land nav at selection, you're going to do probably close to 100 miles under a rucksack, like day, night, bad weather, blisters, twisted knee, horrible conditions, tired, fatigued, all that business. Like, you're going to get lost. So you have to learn how to get unlost. So that only comes with practice. That's part of the managing the cognitive load. So with practice comes that consistency. Like, there are many tasks at land nav that are routine tasks. and you have to make them routine. You shouldn't have to think about how do I put my rucksack on. You shouldn't have to think about how do I set up my map case. You shouldn't have to think about how do I plot a route. Those things should just be procedural. Like you just do them without thinking about them. So in order to do that, you have to practice them. So my number one piece of advice for land nav is get practice. I wrote a book. It'll be out soon. I run land nav musters every month in the woods of North Carolina. Come out. I will teach you these techniques. I will show you how I put them into practice. So I will show you how I weaponize my OCD, my autism, and I turn that into a superpower for me. And so I joke, pace count. I think you and I have differing opinions on pace count. I'm the guy that says you ought to be counting your paces all the time. And I think you take a different tack. You say count when appropriate, but train associate is much quicker and valuable. And I don't disagree. I just say weaponize your autism and count all the time. So I make a joke out of it, but I know that when I walk into my local Lowe's, that it is 46 paces from the front door of the Lowe's to the paint section. And I know that not because I land navigate myself to the paint section, but because in my little OCD brain, I am constantly counting. Every time my left foot hits the ground, I'm counting 1, 2, 3. It is what I do. I've weaponized that autism. So I am always counting my pace. I have made routine this critical thing that helps me stay oriented when I'm out navigating. I just always do that. Time is another one. I am hyper aware of the time. So I know exactly how many paces it takes me to get to 100 meters, and I know that it takes me 1 minute and 13 seconds to do it as well. So because I know that, because I have made routine this critical thing, I now know that when I am out land navigating, I don't have to think about that stuff. I know that if I've been walking for 13 minutes, that I've walked X amount of distance. I know that if I've counted to 60 10 times, I've walked 1,000 meters. So I have made routine these critical things that I don't have to think about anymore. It has no cognitive load for me. Now I get to concentrate, to your point, on terrain association. Now I can think actively about what is this terrain depicting to me? What does it say on the map? How do those two compare? How am I associating those two? Terrain association. So I've made routine these other things. I take the same approach to planning a route. I follow a checklist. And I've memorized the checklist. I don't have to think about it. It just is what it is. And so I don't have to think about it. There's no cognitive load. I do what the checklist tells me to do. Done. No cognitive load. So that's number one. So it takes practice. I have made routine. And I want to remind guys that there is, even though my land nav musters are called advanced land navigation musters, there is no such thing as an advanced land navigation technique. Now, maybe if you did celestial navigation, that would be an advanced land nav technique. I've navigated the entire globe. I've never used celestial navigation. So I don't teach it. I don't profess to know it. I don't think it's particularly valuable because I carry a compass everywhere I go because I'm not an idiot. So there is no such thing as an advanced land nav technique. You must master the basics. That's my advice to guys. If you can master the basics, then you don't have to think about it. So there's no cognitive load. If you make routine these critical things, then you don't have to worry about those critical things. I know I will never lose my map because I attach my pace beads to my map case. And because I am counting all of my steps, every 100 meters, I'm sliding a pace bead down. Because my pace beads are attached to my map case, I know that every 100 meters, I always have my map on me. I have made that routine. I never have to think about where's my map. Oh my God, where's my map? Because I always count, and because I always slide my bead down, and because my beads are attached to my map. Those are my routines. Great news, I never get lost. Or when I do get lost, I get unlost really quickly. So that's the advice for cognitive load. The advice for hand railing at night. This is interesting in that in the last class, a higher than normal amount of guys got busted for hand railing. They were too close to the road. So the challenge is what is 50 meters? The rule is you have to be greater than 50 meters from any road or bowling alley. And bowling alleys are unique terrain features out at Selection. They're like fairways in golf. open terrain that transects the entire training area, and they're useful navigational aids. So, but again, you have to be 50 meters off them. So the challenge becomes is, how do I move between my start point and my end point, where these roads and bowling alleys exist, and keep my required 50-meter distance, and not get caught within inside that? Because if I do, I'm now a roadkill and I'm cheating. And the answer is that there is no secret. Again, there's no advanced technique. You have to learn what 50 meters looks like in day and night. Now, the good news is that you should have a really accurate 100-meter pace count. My pace count is 60 paces is 100 meters. So I know what 30 meters is. So I know that 30 paces is 50 meters. So I routinely, when I'm out training, I will pace off 30 paces for 50 meters. I'll get that visual in my sights and say, okay, that's what that looks like. This is what that feels like. That's what it looks like when I'm moving across it. That's what the distance should be. You sort of get a sense about it. But again, you can't develop that sixth sense. You can't make that routine without practice. So you got to go out and practice. So my recommendation is that when you are out practicing land nav, learn to estimate distance visually and know what 51 meters looks like. Don't go 50, go 51. And then you just got to practice moving at that distance. And while you're out practicing, stop every so often. Stop. If you're handrailing a road or a bowling alley, stop, pace off that distance to the bowling alley and see if that's the distance. Are you actually moving at 51 meters? And if you're not, okay, now I have to recalculate. I got to reconfigure my OCD brain, and now I got to add a couple paces to that because I'm drifting in that direction. So that's my recommendation. The last thing I'd say is that understand that you have a natural drift. Everybody has a drift. Generally speaking, you drift towards your dominant hand side. So I'm right-handed, I drift to the right. So if you find yourself drifting sharply, then perhaps you want to, when you handrail something, you want to handrail it on the opposite side. Now this is opposite guidance from what I normally say. I normally say you should handrail on your so that you drift into the control feature. So then you know that you're not drifting away. But if you have a tendency to drift really hard and it's a real problem for you, then navigate on your dominant hand side so that as you drift, you're drifting away from that. Now you have to be cognizant to know, keep that terrain feature, keep that handrail road in your periphery because you are drifting away from it, but that'll keep you from inadvertently drifting into it. You accept a little bit of risk there, but if it's a real problem for you, that's kind of what I'd advise for you. But it's been a problem. In the last class, more guys than normal got busted handrailing.
Yeah. Lots to unpack there. I definitely will kind of clarify one thing on the pace count. I don't necessarily think pace count shouldn't be kept, especially when you're first starting out. I personally think that the more you do it, of course, which you were kind of just discussing, the more automatic a lot of things get, and the more comfortable you get, the more confidence, the more competence. Being confident in a skill like this requires confidence, which, guess what, requires practice and repetition. But the more you develop, the less of the cognitive load you actually have to manage, because you're only thinking about certain things that work really well for you, the exact skills that you go to all the time. So if that's pace count, great. If it's set your watch, awesome. If you're just an animal out in the woods and you can look at your map, you can know where you're at based on the terrain around you, which is admittedly pretty hard to do at Hoffman just because the terrain's not very prominent, which is nice. It's easy to walk, but also the downside is that it's not as prominent, harder to terrain associate, but there are plenty of features. Even if it's not incline changes and elevation changes, there are features that you can use to terrain associate. So I think just understanding your levels, and you mentioned there's no advanced land nav skills. The people who are advanced at land nav are really, really good at doing the basics, just like any other Green Beret skill. Like, we don't do anything advanced with CQB, but we practice it so many times and we master the basics that when we go into a room and clear it, it looks to the outside eye like we're super advanced, even if we're not. Going back to cognitive load, my general strategy is to only focus on the task at hand. We break down routes into checkpoints for a reason. You could, at any given time, be thinking about say it's your very first point. You're just stepping off. It's midnight and it's dark and it's no loom and maybe it's cold and wet. You're just poopy faced. You could easily be thinking about, okay, how am I going to get to my fourth point today? Guess what? Your fourth point, if you get to it, is probably not going to be for another 10, 11 hours. So what can you do? I always recommend doing a nice, deliberate walkthrough of your actual route plan. So you make your route plan, and then you actually, even if you do this under your breath, you could do this out loud if you want. Don't scream it out, but you can just talk. Okay, I'm going to walk this direction, this distance, and I'm going to hit this. And then I'm going to hit this direction, this distance, hit this. Talk through your route so that you have it kind of memorized. Once you finish that talk through, I always recommend guys, like, you're going to see guys taking off from the start points pretty quickly after you guys get your plot, your points to plot. There's no race to be the first guy to step off. If you make a very nice, deliberate route plan and you have a really good understanding, warm and fuzzy, on what you're going to be doing in the next, several K before you get to your next point, even if someone takes off 5-8 minutes before you, guess what? You're probably going to get to your point faster, especially if you're super fit, which is another kind of tangent here. Managing cognitive load, if all you can think about is your rucksack and how miserable it is or how smoked you are, well, that's also going to kind of cloud what you actually need to be thinking about. So being fit will naturally, inherently reduce your cognitive load. But once you kind of get that route plan, then you just focus your attention back to, okay, what is the very first thing I need to do? I need to go 700 meters to my first checkpoint. Everything other than that doesn't really matter anymore. That's all you're going to be thinking about, is getting to your first checkpoint. And guess what? Once you get there, you're thinking about going to your next checkpoint. Instead of, oh my God, my point's 11K away. How am I ever going to cover this 11K by, sunup or whatever your arbitrary goal is to do? So just kind of limiting your thought process to just the task at hand, the immediate task at hand, instead of all the other future things, how miserable you are, your rucksack, all that kind of stuff will reduce your cognitive load. And aside from that, I would just echo being extremely confident in your ability, but with a caveat, some guys do go into land nav way more confident than they should be, given the fact that they didn't really prepare all that well for it, but maybe they had success in land nav 5 years ago doing some, it's kind of a perishable skill.
Oh, it's very perishable. Yeah.
Yeah, especially actually doing it. Like, you're not going to forget how to plot points and all that kind of stuff, but like actually getting out there and doing it, you definitely have to knock some rust off. Like when I got to the long walk, first couple of days, I admittedly didn't do any land nav prep, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But first couple of days, I'm like, man, I definitely was too confident for this. I kind of got my legs under me and I kind of figured it out pretty quickly. But
that Cadre terrain walk will humble you real quick.
Absolutely, especially the fast one when they take off. But yeah, being confident, being competent, and really just breaking things down into small chunks is, the best thing you can do. And of course, understanding your level. So if you're like me, or if you've heard me say before, I try to clarify this, but if you've heard me say before, you don't need step count, you don't need pace count or whatever. I'm not saying that no one needs to use pace count. When I first started, I used pace count. Like, absolutely, that is going to tell you how far you've gone. And then using the watch, like you'd learn at Dr. Walton's muster, to kind of back yourself up and know how long it takes you to travel certain distances. But overall, I mean, understand your level. You're not going to go out and do something super advanced and smash it your first couple times doing it. But the more often you do it, the more often you repeat it, the better you're going to get. And it's very doable. A lot of guys don't have success because of their cognitive load. Yeah. As for the handrail thing, I don't really have anything to add to that. I think that's a really good piece of advice. It is pretty tough, but at the same time, plenty of people have done it. And if you're just aware of where you're at all times, like you should be when you're doing land nav, at least generally aware of where you're at, then you can avoid making those mistakes, because you can
increase your awareness by being more physically fit, because then you're not overwhelmed 100%. By that rock. You're like, okay, I'm out here just having fun, walking.
100%. Anything more to add on that before we hop into the next one?
Nope. Got a book coming out. Go get that book. It'll explain all that in excruciating detail.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so next question is going to be on the officer side, but I'm going to answer it as an NCO, and then we'll hand it over to you, and you can kind of give your take on it. Okay. So what additional traits and attributes does someone need to be successful as an SF officer compared to an enlisted SF soldier? The majority of information out there applies to being an enlisted soldier and the traits that they need to possess. I was wondering if there was anything additional besides solid leadership skills that one needs to be aware of in order to be successful at SFAS and beyond. All right, so I have had at least probably 4 or 5 team leaders that I can kind of base this information off, or base my perspective off. But Number one, and this is not just for officers, this is basically for everyone, because honestly, there's tons of overlap, like very, very small differences in the minutia, but for the most part, there's a lot of overlap between enlisted and officer. But lead yourself first. Be able to lead yourself first. If you're asking someone or assigning someone a task to do, and you would be either unwilling to do it, you've never done it yourself, you would be unable to do it, or anything along those lines, how are you supposed to sleep at night and actually be like, okay, I'm confident in myself that, I could do that kind of stuff, but I'm asking someone else to do this? Be able to, or actually be willing to help people out and put yourself in situations that maybe officers wouldn't usually be put in, but your guys, when they see you doing this stuff, or at least see your willingness, sometimes they might be like, sir, go ahead, whatever, we got this, but at least see your willingness to do that. That is huge. So you have to lead yourself. You have to hold yourself accountable to things. You can't lie to yourself. You can't be doing all these things outside the team room that kind of just smash your self-esteem and smash your confidence, like little things like pressing snooze in the morning or making a commitment to go do something, even if no one else knows about it. And then, time comes around, I'm not going to do it. You have to be a leader of yourself first. Next one I would say is listen. And I don't just mean listen and like, wait your turn to talk. Listen to what your guys are saying and actually take that to heart and maybe ask follow-up questions like based on what your guys are suggesting or requesting. The guys, when you show up, especially the guys on the team, for the most part, depending on how senior the team is, a lot of those guys are going to have been there for quite a while. They know the situation. They know what's going on. They know what they've done in the past that works well, that doesn't work well. They know the dynamic. You as the officer showing up, you don't know that yet. You know how to do officer things and lead, and you are the face of the team. But when you first show up, just because you're the guy in charge, you're the team leader, that doesn't necessarily mean like you go in and revamp a bunch of stuff. You listen to what the guys are doing. Of course, sometimes in some situations, a team might need to be rebuilt kind of from the ground up. But in other situations, especially if you know you're going to a really solid team, you probably don't need to step in and really change much, if anything. So definitely be an active listener, ask follow-up questions. Don't be afraid to, if you don't know how to do something like you were saying earlier, don't be afraid to admit it and kind of get some advice or figure it out yourself. So that's another huge one. Don't try and reinvent the wheel, kind of along the lines of what the last one was. A lot of guys, I wouldn't say a lot, but in my experience, I've had one officer that kind of showed up and tried to just change a bunch of stuff about a team that was already really doing good things and being successful. They tried to kind of change stuff like, hey, I'm the guy in charge now. We're going to do this instead, or we're going to do this instead. Of course, if you show up and your team is doing something that is, immoral or illegal or against the rules, of course, there's like a little gray area there. But if it's like pretty clear, yeah, you might want to step in and do something like that. But for the most part, if the team is a well-oiled machine, then the team's a well-oiled machine, whether you're there or not. Of course, you have to be the face of the team, but don't try and go in and, start implementing a bunch of things that, make you feel important, but aren't necessarily beneficial to the team. And the last thing I'll say is be the face of the team. So take your role as the face of the team very seriously. So the team sergeant is basically in charge of the operations, and he is the guy who's been around the longest. He's got the most experience. He's in charge of making sure his guys do what they're required to do and what they're expected to do. The officer still has to be the guy who takes responsibility and takes ownership of good things, bad things. There's a little bit of something that I kind of think is important here with the ownership thing. When the team messes up, take ownership of it. Even if it was not your fault, you're still responsible for it. And when you try to like spread the blame out or give it to someone else, you're the guy in charge. So ultimately, you are the guy who is responsible for whatever happened. When good things happen, however, absolutely, you can take credit for it. You can absolutely be a part of the success, but also know that these good things probably happen because of multiple other guys doing what they should have been doing on the team. So even if it's like, hey, congratulations, sir, well done on X mission or X training event, give your other guys some credit and don't try and take that credit. And then also, some guys get really upset when I kind of mention this, but as the face of the team, you are going to be the outward facing individual that higher leadership is going to communicate with and see. You're going to have to brief people. You're going to have to talk to people. You're going to have hard conversations. You're going to get asked difficult questions. Make sure you're someone who actually looks like a Green Beret. You don't have to look like an absolute freaking monster. You don't have to look like a men's fitness cover model or anything along those lines. But I always say, if you can't tell where your neck starts and your chin ends, it's just a straight line. You got jowls or whatever. Or if you can't wear a combat shirt because your belly's kind of hanging down over your belt, you're not really setting a very good first impression. And I don't care what anyone says. Don't judge a book by their cover, whatever. I think that's a Fantasyland quote. People will judge you. And if you show up and you just don't look like you should be a Green Beret or even in the military or whatever it is, you're going to always have to come from behind at some point. That's just how it works. That's how life actually works. So hold yourself accountable to staying fit. Make sure that you are always the person that it can confidently speak for the team and take ownership for the negatives. And if you suck at these things too, like some officers aren't very good at briefing, they're not very good at speaking. There's ways that you can go out and put yourself in situations where you can get better. There's this thing called Toastmasters that absolutely, I think, honestly, unless you're just a natural speaker, any officer could consider going to Toastmasters and actually getting those repetitions and building that confidence, because sometimes you're going to have to talk to very, very high up people that usually in most situations a captain would never have to talk to, like a 2-star or 3-star, whatever it is. And if you can't show up to that confidently and composed and able to actually get the information out because you're super nervous or you just don't know what you're doing, you haven't prepared enough, then that's not going to make the team look very good. So I would say those are probably some of the bigger ones. Of course, there's a lot more, but from the NCO side, that's what I would kind of start with focusing on.
Yeah, that mirrors my experience. I was very fortunate. When I showed up, I've always had great NCOs. All my platoon sergeants were phenomenal. They really took that teach, coach, and mentor role very serious. Like they said, this is my lieutenant, and he is my responsibility, and I owe it to him and to the guys to train him. So I've always been really well coached and mentored, and that is especially true when I showed up to my ODA. My team sergeant, who'd been a team sergeant for already 2 years at that point, sat me down on day one and was like, "Captain, this is what we expect of you." And like he just laid it out. And a couple things that he laid out, and that they were apparent to me before that, but to hear it, like, this is your contract with us. Number one, fitness is a non-negotiable. His tour duty before he came to the team was he was the lead instructor down in Key West at CDQC. So like fitness was like non-negotiable. You're going to be a yoked up badass. So every day was a full blown fucking monster. And we didn't know shit about fitness back then. It was just like harder is better. So every day was a beast. So fitness is non-negotiable. Number two, loyalty goes both ways. We expect you to be loyal to us. And if you are, we will be loyal to you. You are to your point, you are our representative outside of this team room. When you go up and talk to the head shed, you are representing us. When you go see the battalion commander, you're representing us. When we go down range, you are going to be briefing an admiral or an ambassador who is a 4-star assimilated rank. You're going to be briefing senior host nation officials. You are not authorized to fuck that up. Like our credibility, our freedom of maneuver is dependent on you not being an idiot. So you gotta get your shit together. Like you gotta be highly competent, very confident, humble, well presented. You can't be a fat ass. Your uniform's always got to look good. You have to speak well. You can't say fuck every other word. Like you got to have your shit together. So that was those were laid out to me very clearly. And the other thing, and then from the boys, the expectation is we expect you to do everything that we do, but better. So we're going to cross train. Hey, Captain, come here. Let me show you how to do this IV on the foot. And okay, you did it one time. Now let's flick off the lights, and here's the set of nods. And you better get it on the first stick. And I'm like, hey man, but you didn't get it. He's like, doesn't matter what he did. This is what we expect of you. It's like, boom, go. We're going to go to the shoot house, and Captain, you better be hitting the X-ring on every shot. cold bore, 25 meter, X-ring. You better be hitting every one. Hey, we're doing calc and place a demo. You better build the perfect booger charge. And, so take that out. Hey, my Echo would not set up the radio for me. He showed me one time, and the expectation was, Captain, set it up. Let's go. If you got to make your own, you got to understand, wavelength propagation, because you got to build your own antennas when we're out in the woods. Go. So that was the expectation. We go to the dojo, and we're rolling. You better accept every challenge. If another team, God help you, if another team rolls into this dojo and you don't tap out their commander. So like that's the expectation. So the expectation from the boys was, you're going to do everything we do to the absolute highest degree. So you got to be willing to come in and work. So you spend a day. You go to the range for a day, you got to be out there plinking. You got to be practicing. You got to be doing all the drills. You got to be shooting. You got to be doing all that stuff for repetition. We would go to the range so much that I would get muscle failure in my trigger finger. I mean, it was like, man, we're going to shoot. And then you get down the range and the boys go home. Guess where you at? You're at the desk. You're doing risk assessments for tomorrow's training. Admin, and you're doing it all because that's the expectation. Because the boys aren't doing that. That's not their job. Your job is to do that. And then you got to go up and you got to brief the group commander, because we got a J set coming up and he needs to know what the training plan is. So you got to go do that. So the reality is, and my team sergeant told me this: you're only here for 2 years. You better be busting your ass. Your job, Captain, is to force this team to perform. You're pushing innovation. You're pushing the next good idea. You're setting the pace, because you're only here for 2 years. And our job as the NCOs on the team is to slow you down. And if we don't do our job and you don't do your job, we'll be like that team down the hall that nobody wants to be on. So your job is to push, our job is to pull, and we will meet in the middle with a high performing, super badass team. That is the only acceptable answer. And it was like, okay, then that's what we're doing. And that held through my entire time on the team. And God help you, if you showed up and you didn't perform, if you were doing sprints and a guy beat you on sprints, you're going to hear about it the rest of the day. If you went to the range and you didn't outshoot everybody, well, you better get your wallet out, because that's a case of beer, brother. So it was like, that's the expectation. And so you got to be an expert on all those things. And if you are willing to put forth that honest effort, you will be shown the good grace of guys helping you out. A good, senior medic will make certain that you are squared away. He will make certain that he teach girls. I mean, my medic let me do. We do live tissue training, and I'm over here doing chest tubes on goats. Like that's not something that I should be expected to be able to do. But he's like, I'm going to give you those opportunities because you're willing to outwork. And so my expectation has always been those things that I just laid out, and I have carried that through to every position that I've had. I've never had to no one has ever waited on me. I've never been late, never been last, and I've never been light, because it was never acceptable. And so I don't accept that. I don't accept that of the junior officers working for me. I don't expect my non-commissioned officers to have to deal with that on an ODA. If that captain's not performing, he's gone. He's out of there. And I've seen guys. There was a team across the hall from me, and this captain I have some history with him. He was a dirtbag, and we were doing helo casting, and you jump out of the helicopter over the water, and then you crawl up the caving ladder, get back in, and do it again. And this fat ass, fitness is a non-negotiable. He was struggling to climb up the ladder, and it's difficult. It's a challenge. You got the rotor wash. You're wet. You're fatigued. He couldn't climb up the ladder, and he said it was a shoulder injury. I can't do it because I got this old high school shoulder injury, and it got to the point where the helicopter had to do extra turns, waiting for this guy to climb his fat lazy ass up into the bird. And I remember at the end of that training rotation, we were back at the company cleaning up gear, and the 18 Fox, the number 2 of his team, came across the hall and said to me, he says, "Well, why couldn't you have gotten here a week earlier? We'd have got you on our team instead of that guy." And I was like, oh my God, that dude is done. That captain, he has lost that team room. They will not follow that guy to chow hall. So That always stuck with me. And within a week he was gone. They sent him off. He was the assistant battalion S4. Congratulations. That's like the worst job you could ever imagine. And it was all because he made excuses. He didn't hold himself accountable, and he wasn't physically fit. Non-negotiable. That's the expectation. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I would say also one last thing on officers. I think most likely because the dynamic in the regular Army is a little bit different than it is in a team room. Some guys show up and they think that they can't really like gel with the boys. They can't be like one of the boys. There's definitely a little bit of a fine line between being too much of one of the boys, and I don't really have a definition of one of the boys. Basically, shooting the shit, going out, having fun, doing things that are usually considered non-officer things, but just like you can absolutely be friends with guys on the team. I still have two of my former team captains that are really good friends to this day. One of them actually was my officiant for my wedding. He literally married my wife and I. So don't be afraid just because you're an officer and you're a little bit different and there's somewhat of a different dynamic between all the NCOs. Of course, you're definitely outmanned as far as personnel go on the team. It's just you. You might have a warrant with you, but also don't be afraid to get with the boys and do stuff outside the team room, or go do things that usually officers don't do instead of doing your admin stuff. Of course, you got to get the admin stuff done too, but don't spend all your time just kind of separated in this like weird little bubble, because I've seen officers that do that and I've seen officers that don't. I've also seen officers that are not officer enough and like too much of similar to an NCO, which can be a problem, but don't be afraid to like kind of be a bro once in a while.
Yeah, my company commander actually sat me down and had that talk with me. It was right before we were getting ready to deploy. It was my first deployment with the team, and he said to me, "There's a fine." So let's just get this clear: officers are not better than NCOs. It's not more honorable. It's not more. There may be an element of prestige, but officers are not better than NCOs. They are different. We have a commissioning source. Like literally, the oath of commission is different than the oath of enlistment. They are different. They say different things. And if you don't have that basic understanding, then you need to do some research, because they are very different fiduciary responsibilities, and that's not a financial responsibility. That's a by credence responsibility. So I'm not better than my NCOs, but I am different in that I am in command. The detachment commander is in command. I have command responsibility. I have command authority, although that's sometimes a little wishy-washy on ODA. That normally rests with the company commander. But on a team, you're the officer. You have a role to play in that there may be a point in time where you have to order that guy on your team, your friend, your colleague, to do something very, very dangerous. Attack that hill, take that bunker, whatever it may be. So you always have to keep that in the back of your mind, in that you are in command of that team. So there has to be some separation of church and state, for lack of a better term. And my commander described it to me this way. He said, "You're going to go down range, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity where you're going to have your back against the wall with the boys, and you're going to be fighting off the locals, like literally in a physical bar, in a bar fight, the gringos against the host nation guys." And that held true. We definitely cleared a few bars. But you can never give up the moral high ground, because the moment you behave, to your point, unethically, immorally, or illegally, you lose that high ground. And you cannot, from that point on, you can't order that guy to take that hill, because you've lost that high ground. So while you will blow the froth off of many a cold one with the boys, you should definitely purchase more than your fair share of rounds. You cannot give up the moral high ground, because the expectation is that while you are one of the boys for this moment, you are not always one of the boys. And my team sergeant actually went so far as that except for on very specific low visibility clandestine missions, you were not allowed to use my first name. You like it was Sir, and my nickname was Cappy. Like it graded his insanely graded him that he allowed the boys to call me Cappy. for captain. And like that for him was like, that's as casual as we're getting around here. Like you're gonna treat the captain with respect, and captain, you're gonna behave respectfully. You know what I mean? So like it was very clear to me what those donations were. But I agree that you got to be one of the boys, because you're going to be living long term with these guys downrange. But you can't be fully one of the boys, and that's the burden of command. Like that's the reality of it, and you should welcome that, and you should also be willing to have that discussion with your team and explain to them, I am making these decisions this way for these reasons. If you can't articulate that to the boys, then you're probably not making good decisions. So I'd leave it at that.
Yeah, great points. All right, let's hop into. You got time for 2 more?
I do, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, so next question, pretty simple one, but very important. What are 5 habits that can be done every day to build character and grit for SFAS besides working out? Awesome. I'll start with my top 5 here. Of course, there are a million different ways, 1,000,001 different ways to build character. Actually, I made a recent YouTube video kind of on this, and I'll post it in the description of these. But I would say some of the top ones: plan ahead and also stick to your commitments. So it's kind of hard to go through life and be successful regardless of what you're actually trying to do, whether it's professional, your fitness, your nutrition, whatever it is, without planning anything. I personally think that at least this is what I do every week. Once a week, I sit down for about an hour. I brain dump all the things that are in my head. I check my notes from the week of things that, I'd otherwise forget that I know I need to do. And I actually plan and put them in my calendar when I'm supposed to do them and how long I think they're going to be able to, or going to end up taking. And also, although I'm not perfect, I do my very best to stick to those plans. And there are some that are going to be super easy to stick to, things that don't take a lot of effort, things that don't have big startup costs. But there are also going to be things that you maybe get pulled in a different direction. Like, hey, I got this meal prep in the fridge, but my coworkers are going out to eat lunch at a Chinese buffet. Should I eat my meal prep since I'm prepping for selection? I got an important workout later, or should I go smash a Chinese buffet? Of course, that's not always going to be the wrong answer. But in most cases, if you have a commitment to do something, especially if it's something that's a little bit challenging, it might work that discipline muscle a little bit, and it's also going to be beneficial for your overall success, stick to it. A lot of people suck at sticking to things, especially plans they made in private that no one else knows about. Become a master at sticking to the things you decide to do and doing them regardless of whether you feel like it or not. Number 2, read books, actual physical books. Dr. Walton's got a couple that you can check out if you haven't yet, but there's a million books out there. And I see this on Reddit all the time. Guys will leave comments, they'll ask questions, whatever. And I'm not like a grammar Nazi, and my grammar's not perfect all the time. And I don't think I'm like a master writer. But you can tell by reading my comments, my questions, etc., that I actually sit down and read things. Reading books is almost like a cheat code. It's like one of the most productive ways you can spend your time. A lot of people think it's not, but even reading nonfiction or fiction books, that is still a great use of your time, because you learn how to kind of picture things in your head, form ideas, but also you learn how to use grammar and write properly. There are a lot of guys I can think of that I worked with that would need somebody to go read their emails before they sent them out to make us not look bad, because their grammar was just all over the place and they had no idea what they were doing. Reading physical books, you can listen to books, of course, too. That's fine, but also not instead of reading, along with reading. That will actually help you in many, many different ways. Of course, if it's a self-development nonfiction book, you can learn how to be better and improve yourself as an individual. But if nothing else, it's going to teach you how to write. It's going to teach you how to not look like an idiot when you send out emails or write things on various different places. Next one is never press snooze. This kind of goes back to number 1, but the first thing you do every day is wake up. And if you start every single morning with either pressing snooze or you have to set 7 alarms because you don't get up to your first one, you're starting every single day of your life with a lie. And I can't think of a worse way to start one day, let alone almost every day. And I know there are people out there who press snooze or set multiple alarms. Hold yourself accountable and wake the fuck up when your alarm goes off. And this is not me recommending you should cut yourself short on sleep. This kind of goes into the day before. When you set your alarm for the next day, if you use an alarm, most people do because they have to get up for certain things, plan accordingly, plan ahead, go to bed at a reasonable hour so that when you wake up the next day, you're not inclined to press snooze. But even if you are inclined, some nights you may not sleep well, some nights you might get home late, whatever it is, when that alarm goes off, that is your first commitment to the day to hold yourself to. So freaking get up. Have conversations with strangers. This is another one. This is not necessarily a tip for every single person. Some people are naturals at this. They're charismatic. They speak well to others. I personally have had to do a lot of work on this in the past because I used to just not be very conversational. And I didn't really know the basics of being a charismatic individual, which guess what? To be charismatic, you don't have to be super funny. You don't have to be super witty. You just have to have the basics down, like listening to people, making the person you're talking to feel important. Develop a solid handshake, not a vice grip handshake, but definitely not a wet noodle, somewhere in between. Look people in the eye, ask them questions, listen very well to the answer, not just wait your turn to speak, but actually listen to the answer because you can continue carrying the conversation that way. These are things that, like, to some people may sound really obvious, but to a lot of people, especially in today's digital age, we don't really interact with people, and you kind of have to, depending on what your life situation is, you have to go out and actually do these types of things and practice them because you get more confident, you get more skilled at it. So that one's huge. That one's been huge for me. Like, I literally used to have to go to the grocery store and intentionally start conversations with strangers, not just like, hey, how's it going? Weather's crazy, huh? Like actual conversations. Some people, they're not going to really want to talk to you, but honestly, that's a good thing. You're going to get used to also, as kind of an added bonus, you're going to get used to people shutting you down and denying you or whatever it is. The more you do it, the more of a, whatever, not a big deal. Move on to the next. It's going to become. So that's a huge one. And the last one, kind of along those lines, is actually rate yourself. At the end of the day, have some sort of rating system. What I like to do, and there's many different ways you can do this, many different approaches, but I have 2 to 3 things that I did today. I write them down, and I start with this too because my mind, and probably a lot of people listening to this, their minds go to all the negatives, the things they fucked up. But actually giving yourself credit is super huge. So I'll write down 2 or 3 things that I did really well today so that I can actually give myself some credit, build some confidence going into the next day, and continue to kind of ride that momentum and continue doing those things, sustain in the future. And then also write a couple things down that you sucked at. And beyond that, how you plan on getting better at them. You don't have to write this whole big essay or anything like that, but just like, hey, I sucked at these 3 things today. I could do them better. Here's how I'm going to do that better. And here's when I'm going to do that. Like, actually plan, like, tomorrow I'm going to go try this again and I'm going to do it differently this way. This will give you, whether this is like your workout, whether it is an interaction with someone, whether it is, you had something important to do and you decided to scroll for 2 hours instead to procrastinate. This will actually give you accountability of sticking to things and doing things at the level that you expect to do them. And it'll be like actual hard evidence that you can look at and you can kind of rate yourself over time. Like, how did I get better at those things? How have I kind of stayed the same? How have I gotten worse? And what do I still need to work on? So those would be probably my top 5. I'm definitely interested to see what you think.
Yeah, that's a great list. And I'll tell you, when I read the question, I heard the question that said, besides working out, what habits can I have to build grit and character besides working out? And my number one answer is work out. So I'm going to go against the grain here. You learn to do hard things by doing hard things. So working out is a critical component of that, especially when you don't want to work out. Like to your point about the alarm, man, that's a great point. If the first thing you do every day is hit snooze, like, you're training yourself to be a quitter. So you must work out every day. You don't have to kill yourself every day. You don't have to be a max effort WOD every day, but like, you must work out every single day. Even when you're sick, get up, get a hot shower and stretch in the shower. That'll take you 30 seconds. You've worked out. Okay. Let's temper our enthusiasm a little bit, but work out every day. We learn to do hard things by doing hard things, even when you don't want to. The reason I cold plunge, so I don't know if you're a big cold plunge and sauna guy. I've been really getting into it last year. Sauna is great. Cold plunge is awesome, but the benefits aren't as well documented or efficacious as you want them to be. But I still cold plunge because I don't want to cold plunge. I do it because it sucks, right? So that's really the only reason to do it. If I cold plunge in the morning, how are you going to beat me that day? I've already beat myself. First thing I did when I got up is I got in 40-degree water. What the hell are you going to do to me today that's worse than that? Like, I already won. So do hard things by doing hard things. Working out is one of those. Even when you don't want to, you got to get the workout in. You are probably going to be more successful at that if you, right to your point, write down what you're going to do. So my second one is read and write every day. Read and write. And your point about physical books is well made. The literature is overwhelming that analog is superior to digital for recollection. So get a physical book. I'm going to scan my computer right now. I'm in my library. This is my library. Look at all my books. Like this, that's one half of the library here. There's all the books. Like that's what smart guys do. Dummies have man caves where they just watch sports. I watch sports. I have a man cave. Real men also have libraries where they do prominent thinking. They become formidable. They wrestle with ideas. And that's why I encourage guys to write. Writing forces you to organize your thinking. So if all you ever do is read, but don't ever make sense of that, you're really kind of doing yourself a disservice. So write it down. So, and this goes back to point number one about doing hard things, is that say what you're going to do, write down what you're going to do, and then point two is be man enough to do what you said you were going to do. So this goes sort of to the point about meal prepping. If all you ever do is prep the meals, but then keep going to the Chinese buffet and never actually eat the meals, then what good is it? If all you ever do is get the ideas in your head, never write down what you're going to do with those ideas, then what good is it? So, and that's where you get guys that can't write emails, that need to be, grammar checked by somebody. So you don't ever want to be that guy. You want to be formidable. You want to be smart. You want to be capable. So read and write every single day. I read literally every day. I write every single day. I journal every day. That's the whole purpose of Shut Up and Ruck. Shut Up and Ruck is a performance journal. It's designed for you to write down every single day what you're going to do, what you did, how much you ate, what you read, what you thought about, what your challenges are, how you're going to improve, how you're going to get better. Man, that is incredibly powerful. If you can master that early on in your career, you'll make great progress. So that's the whole reason why I made that an analog process. Number three is I'd say treat yourself like you are your own client. So if you are a performance coach, a strength and conditioning coach, a life hack guru, whatever, you have access to all the information. You know exactly what a proper diet looks like. You know exactly what good recovery looks like. You know what good routines are. Treat yourself like a client and don't allow yourself to make excuses for not doing those things. Don't allow yourself to eat like shit. Don't allow yourself to stay up late scrolling. Don't allow yourself to hit the snooze button. Treat yourself like you were your own performance client. And when that alarm goes off, get the fuck up out of bed. I'll actually one up you. I don't use an alarm. I have conditioned myself that I get between 7 and 8 hours of sleep every night. So I go to bed 8 hours before I have to get up in the morning, before I must be awake. So I'm going to wake up to an hour earlier than that because I get 7 to 8 hours every night, no matter what. So because I have made a pact with myself that I'm only going to sleep for this amount, and I'm going to get up, and when I get up, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up, I'm going to go downstairs, I'm going to make my bulletproof coffee, I'm going to journal. That's what I'm going to do. And only once I'm done those things, then I can scroll social media or go for a walk or whatever. Because I write down in my journal every day, here's today's workout. It was cold as shit yesterday morning. It was freezing cold. But I put in my journal, I'm doing a 5-mile ruck today. So when I got up, I had to go do a 5-mile ruck. I didn't want to. It was cold, brother. I did it because I had made a pact with myself. I made a contract. This is what I said I was going to do. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. I'm going to be reliable. So do that. Fourth thing is go outside every day. It is so easy to have shit delivered to you, Grubhubbed, consume the media. You've got at your fingertips in your phone. You have the all the world at your fingertips. It could be very easy to not go outside. I want to encourage you guys to go outside. Number one, you should be getting 30 minutes of low-level direct face sunlight every day. That's the protocol. You got to go outside to do that. But just go outside, touch grass, breathe some air, go interact with people, go meet other human beings and engage in meaningful conversation with them. To your point about go to the grocery store, and like, it's a little bit weird to go to the grocery store and have a conversation with a total stranger. But when they're picking out some bok choy, go, what are you making with that? When I used bok choy last, it was too watery, and I think what are you cooking with that? Like, have a real conversation. Like, they may be like, hey, fucking weirdo, beat it, right? Or they may say, here's this amazing recipe. Let me show you where I got it on. Here's on Instagram. Here it is, and like, you should check it out. And be like, man, like you're like, that's what normal human beings do. Don't stalk, but engage in conversation. So you got to go outside every day. Go out into the real world. Engage with humanity. And number 5 is produce something every single day. Produce something physical every single day. Even if that physical thing is just the notes that you made in your journal, produce something. I go out to my workshop, I call it the laboratory, and I go out there and I fiddle around with something every day. I'm restringing the dummy cord on a compass, or I'm going through my land nav muster supplies. I'm counting, inventorying chem lights and checking maps and looking at graphic training aids. Like, I'm doing something out there every single day. I'm hanging a picture, I'm repairing a pipe, whatever it is. Do something physical every single day so that you can say that you've accomplished something. And because if you make that pact with yourself that I'm going to go do something physical today, then you, by default, you're going to get out of the house. You're going to have to make plans. You're going to have to be accountable. All those things that we just talked about, that's part of the process. So if you stick to that and you're consistent with that, you'll build character and grit. In order to be somebody worth assessing, be a worthy person, right? I always say we build good Green Berets from good soldiers. We build good soldiers from good citizens. We build good citizens from good people. So learn to be a good person. All the stuff that plays into that. It's all the stuff that you just described, all the stuff that I just described. You do that every day, you'll become somebody formidable before you know it. So that's my advice.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, a lot of overlap in those. I wonder why.
Yeah, shocking.
Not surprising at all. Awesome. So let's make this the last question. Pretty good one. Definitely one that we'll let you start with, just because you've got yours, and my standards are a little bit slightly different, but like pretty damn similar. So, given that SOPSI is now only a few weeks, I believe it's 5, how should an 18 X-ray physically show up to OSIT if crushing SFAS is their number 1 priority? I would hope that's your priority if you're showing up to OSIT as an X-ray. What times and numbers do you want to see prior to shipping to account for detraining that will potentially happen? Send it.
Yeah, so this may be a little bit of that paralysis by analysis. A lot of guys will not ship out or even refuse to talk to a recruiter until they reach some arbitrary performance threshold, some benchmark. And I fought that for a long time, to say you must be able to do, run this, ruck that, whatever, and don't even consider it until you do that. Because what you'll get is that paralysis by analysis. Guys will say, "Oh, I'm not going to, if I can't squat 3 times my body weight, then why even go?" Don't do that. You do not have to meet a set of arbitrary benchmarks before you go. I didn't have arbitrary benchmarks. You probably didn't. You went full send. However, because I got this same question so many times, I did develop some benchmarks, and I actually posted those on Reddit. And there's 2 different posts. One is performance benchmarks for pre-OSET and performance benchmarks for pre-SFAS. And I looked it up this morning, and I wrote them down. So pre-OSET, 50 hand release push-ups, 10 pull-ups, 15-minute 2-mile, 40-minute 5-mile, 12-mile ruck in 3 hours of 35 pounds, and be able to bench, squat, and deadlift your body weight. Those are that's pretty achievable. If you're a reasonably fit young guy, you shouldn't have to struggle too much with any of those. Pre-SFAS, that they're a little bit higher. I got 75 hand release push-ups, 15 pull-ups, 12 to 13-minute 2-mile, 35-minute 5-mile, 2.5-mile 12-mile ruck with 55 pounds, bench press your body weight, squat 1.5 times your body weight, and deadlift 2 times your body weight. Now, I say all that, I caveat that again by saying if you don't meet one of those performance benchmarks, that is not cause to halt your progress. There's some great ways to get there, right? So let's talk about what the min standards are at selection. The min standards are 28 hand release push-ups. Brother, you got to be able to do 28 hand release push-ups on a breath hold, 6 pull-ups, and a 15-12 2-mile run. My God, like if you can't meet those standards, then you got no business even thinking about this. So clearly you want to be above those standards. I think those are the performance benchmarks, and I don't think they're that hard to get to. So Shut Up and Ruck is an 8-month program that is literally called From Sofa to Selection. It is specifically designed that as long as you're not morbidly obese, in 8 months you can get there. I think most guys are probably about 6 months away. You got to be cognizant of overtraining, right? So you got to do some injury prevention. Don't go all in day one. Probably shouldn't start rucking on day one. You should probably do some cardio based on that zone 2, build that out. Work on your. There's a lot of guys. It's actually interesting. I get messages a lot from guys down at Benning, some drill sergeants, and they're telling me that they're seeing an increase in new recruits that get shin splints just from standing in boots all day, just from being in formation. Like not the physical, like there are guys that are getting shin splints while they're in the 30th AG, waiting to go to basic training because they're not used to wearing boots. They're not wearing standing around all day. So there's some injury prevention stuff you should do. I have a whole chapter of that in Shut Up and Ruck. So you can work on that. All of that is very workable. It's very trainable. So I think there's some performance benchmarks. I want to caution guys, they're not hard and fast. Like I literally made them up. I provide justification for why. There's some documentation for that, but they're not hard and fast. I would tell guys, my mantra for this year is going to be start. Just start. Do it. Start doing it. Shut up and go. You don't need the perfect ruck. You don't need the perfect sock. You don't need the perfect boot. Just start going, and we'll build it. We'll build that aircraft in flight. We're more capable of doing that. So that's my long answer to the short question.
Yeah, my numbers are not very dissimilar. I also fully agree that just because you're not quite there yet doesn't necessarily mean. A lot of guys think that when they go to OSIT and they've heard that maybe at OSIT you're not going to really train all that much towards the end, you might lose some fitness. A lot of guys think that's like a death sentence, but even if you do, I've talked about this in a recent episode with John Hamilton. Even if you do lose some fitness at OSIT, it's not like you start SFAS day one right after you finish airborne school. You're going to have time to build it back up. And if you go with a good solid base of fitness, even if you do lose it, you're going to be able to rebuild it faster. And if you guys want to hear about some things that you can do while at OSIT to kind of maintain your fitness, even if you don't have a ton of access and stuff like that, I believe it's episode 141. You can check that out. It's on YouTube as well as on audio. We talk about that. But I think most of my numbers are the same, but I'll just read them off really quickly. So about a 40-minute 5 mile. This is, again, not pre-selection. This is before you go to SFAS or before you go to OSIT. About a 40-minute 5 mile or a little bit slower than that, but trending faster. So say, for example, 6 months ago, you were running a 53-minute 5 mile and now you're at like 42, but you've made all that progress in that amount of time. That's a really good sign. Even if you're a little bit slow right now, you can still get faster as you go. About 50 hand release push-ups. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Could be a little under that. Hand release push-ups are something that you can absolutely build pretty quickly with some dedicated training. 8 pull-ups. That's honestly kind of generous. I think every male should be able to do 8 pull-ups just regardless. But at least if you're at 8, you can add a couple more reps before you go to selection, and you're going to be comfortably getting that 6. And Doc Walton mentioned the minimum standards for SFAS. If you're anywhere near those, I would probably push your date to the right. Because, if you're running a 15-12 or whatever the 2 mile was,
you ain't gonna make it.
Yeah, best of luck on the other runs. And, you're going to also be kind of poopy faced when you see almost everybody there beating you. But anyway, back on track. Able to ruck 15-minute miles for about 3 hours. So that's about a 3-hour, 12-mile ruck. Give or take, of course, doesn't have to be perfect, with about 45 pounds. Generally speaking, before you leave for OSIT, I don't really see a big reason to have much more than 45, 50 pounds in your ruck, maybe 55 if you're a freak and you know what you're doing, but not really all that necessary. And it's also not necessary to do a bunch of ruck running. If you can get to where you can ruck where you're just walking 15-minute miles, your future potential for being able to ruck, trot, or run, or shuffle, whatever it is, which you'll inevitably probably do during gate week, is great. So just because you're not every single ruck, you're not hitting those 12 to 13-minute mile pace that you talk about all the time. If you think about it like running, even if you are capable of running a 35-minute 5 mile or 7-minute miles, is every single run you do going to be at that pace? No, it's not. So rucking's kind of the same. A little different, of course, but don't feel like you have to just be smashing the standard every single training session It's like trying to load the bar and max out every time you lift. It's just not really all that realistic. It's training versus actually getting tested on it. And then for the strength, I have always been hesitant to give out barbell strength numbers, but since they're so easy to standardize, as opposed to like you should be leg pressing this or hack squatting this or doing a machine chest press with this, I do like to kind of give barbell numbers, but also with a caveat. You should be capable of doing these lifts or an equivalent, something similar. For example, if you can't bench press what I have here, 1.25 times your body weight, but you can do a weighted dip with 4 plates around your waist, your pressing strength is strong enough. If you don't squat, you don't back squat, my number is 1.5 times your body weight, but you can do ass to grass, like calves to hamstrings, full depth hack squats with 6 plates on each side, your legs are strong enough. And then deadlift 1.75. Usually, because most people are stronger deadlifters than squatters, I put that number a little higher. That being said, a lot of people think that is a rule, and that's always the case. The deadlift is very subject to different anthropometries or body proportions, and some people just aren't built well for deadlifting. There are guys who are professional powerlifters that have crazy high squats. Their deadlift and their bench press are like actually pretty similar because they have really short, stocky arms. They got barrel chests, and they don't have great leverages for the deadlift. That doesn't mean they're weak. They're just not very built well for that lift. And me,
there's a ton of literature about femur length and how that correlates to strength. It's like, I mean, you can't control any of that. So you have to be smart about it.
Exactly. And like me, I'm a pretty lanky, slender individual. I've built a decent amount of muscle throughout my life. But even when I was super duper skinny, 6'1", 175 pounds, my bench press was like, I don't even want to tell people what my bench press was, but I was pulling 500 plus off the ground because I'm just built really well for deadlifting. So those are kind of the barbell numbers, but at the same time, if you have a lift that still uses those same movement patterns, the press, the pull, the squat, the hinge, overhead, vertical pulls and pushes, and those feel better on your joints and they still allow you to train consistently as opposed to only using a barbell. Nothing wrong with a barbell, of course. They're excellent lifts and you can build lots of strength. And I think most people, if not everyone, should learn how to master the barbell lifts. But if you've been lifting long enough and you have found a safety bar squat works better for you, or a neutral grip bar bench press works better for you than a barbell bench press, or using some sort of rotating handles on pull-ups just feels better on your shoulders and elbows, but you can do 25 reps of them. Guess what? When you have to do your pull-up test on a straight bar, you're going to be okay. So don't get too caught up. Like you said, don't get too caught up around those exact lifting numbers. I wouldn't expect to gain, unless you're going into basic really, really weak, I wouldn't expect to gain a ton of strength and muscle. Some guys do because they're going in very weak and they're just open to making rapid gains. But if you can go in and you're pretty strong, and as we always kind of say, selection is an endurance event with a strength component, not a strength event with a endurance component. As long as you're decently strong, you can carry your weight. I was a weak motherfucker when I went to selection by gym standards, but I was strong enough to carry stuff. I had the specific fitness requirements to be successful during team week, and I could walk forever with a ruck on, and I could run pretty fast, and I was good to go. So yeah, I think it's super important not to get too wrapped around the axle with these standards, but just kind of use them as a little bit of a guide, litmus test to direct your training and kind of plan out when you think it's going to be an appropriate time for you to leave. But at the same time, if you're a little bit short, there's going to be enough time for you to build it if you're consistent. And as soon as you get out of OSIT, guess what? For a lot of that time after OSIT, between day one of airborne school and day one of SOPSI, you're going to have time to either fuck off and do whatever, or actually go train and build your fitness and work on your weaknesses. The guys who use that time to build their weaknesses and get better are the guys who get better and they succeed. The guys who kind of just fuck off and whatever, no one's telling me to work out, so I'm not going to. Those guys don't fare very well.
And remember, progress is not linear. You're going to cycle 100%. Through it. So don't just think of your deconditioning period during OSUT as I'm going backwards. Think of it, I'm deloading, right? So I'm resting a little bit. I trained real hard before. Now I have different priorities for this next couple of months. I'll get back in there. Much easier to get refit than to get fit for the first time. So one of the projects we're actually working on for the coming year is a low/no equipment maintenance program for guys in OSA. It's going to be designed so if you do Ruck Up or Shut Up, or Shut Up and Ruck, which is the 8-month program, you show up really fit, ready to go, and then like guys get there and they're like, oh my God, I'm slowing down too much, I'm losing too much. So we're developing a take with you a little pamphlet journal to take with you two OSET that you can do in the bay, with a ruck or a buddy on your back, or mop buckets or whatever. And it's all very creative and low overhead. Cool. We think we're going to call it clandestine fitness because something you can get away with without the drills getting too much in here. And it's funny because I mentioned earlier that I have these drill sergeants that are part of my little network, and they're asking me, hey, can you help us come up? We got these guys in our companies. Sometimes we'll get a whole cohort, 20, 30 these SF guys, and we don't know what to do with them. Like we do, we can't do PT with just them. We got to do it with the whole company, but these guys clearly want more. Give us a resource. So that's kind of what our thinking is for that. That'll be coming out next summer. So it's a real problem, easily addressable, though it's just exercise science. We can crack that code. So
yeah, I think that is a pretty good spot to wrap it up. But along those lines, what else do you have going on, and where can guys find your books as well as your resources, your articles, and all that kind of stuff, as well as your land nav training?
Well, let me first by saying thanks for having me on, man. It's great talking with you. It's always good to share good ideas with smart people. So check me out. The website is tfvoodoo.com. All the book links will be there. Muster tickets. We do have some significant movement in the next year. So the first book, Ruck Up or Shut Up, is due for a rewrite. We're going to update that. This is my working copy. You can see how it's all tabbed out and everything. We're going to have that one updated and rewritten in the spring of 25. We're going to have the new PFA guidance, the new combat readiness assessment or combat fitness test. We'll talk about that extra week of land nav. We'll have a whole year of data to inform that discussion, and it'll be reformatted. So the first book, the formatting is horrible. It looks like a high schooler did it. We bought new formatting software. It's going to look really, really good. Of course, Shut Up and Ruck is out now. That's the 8-month performance journal. We have a RASP-specific version that'll be ready in summer of 2025, and part of that will also be this mid-OSET performance journal that'll be coming out in the summer as well. And then, of course, never get lost. There it is, the land nav book, baby. We're just waiting on the cover art to get back. Should be here this weekend, and it'll go to publish. It'll be in your stockings for Christmas. That's going to be a great resource for guys. And then, of course, the intent is you sign up for a muster. You can know nothing about land nav. Read Never Get Lost, give you the baseline. Show up to a land nav muster and get on the ground, and then we're launching a YouTube series to fill in the gaps in between there. That's all coming in the new year. I've got a civilian rucking book. Dr. Burkhart, who helped me write Shut Up and Ruck, is writing a civilian version of that for the civilian rucking market. There's a bunch of weirdos out there that like rucking for fun that don't have to pass selection to do it. So we're going to address that. Dave Sue is my endurance guy. So Dave's a retired Green Beret combat diver. He is the lead endurance coach out at Naval Special Warfare out in Coronado, and he and I are working on an Air Force Special Warfare prep program for the pararescue guys, and that's coming probably a year away. I'm rewriting the Ranger Handbook. Surprise, surprise. Small unit tactics, and then this summer, we're probably going to start launching our non-land nav muster. So we're going to do a ruck/fitness/mobility muster probably in the summer times. We realized last summer we damn near killed a couple guys. It was so hot out doing land nav. Maybe we need something a little bit less stressful for the summertime for our Marine and Air Force brethren who aren't as tough as us Army guys. So we're going to be launching that this summer. I've got a facility here. I've got a bunch of exercise scientists that are jumping in. We're going to do dry needling and physical therapy and strength and conditioning, proper lifting techniques, how to tie lashings, how to pack a ruck, how to shuffle, whole 9 yards. That's coming out probably this summer. That's all on the horizon. And then my 2-year goal. So I remember I told you I make very aspirational goals for what's coming up next. I'm writing a fiction book. I'm branching out of nonfiction. I'm going to write a fiction spy novel to get my creative juices out, and that's coming. And that's probably a year, 2 years away from, but that's on the horizon. We'll talk many more times before then, but that's coming.
I dig it. You are a production machine, and for those not aware, he's a very prolific writer, and I am looking forward to not only the Land Nav book, but also the fiction book. I think I'm going to be the first one to buy that. So hell yeah. Awesome stuff. Well, Dr. David Walton, thank you very much for being on the show. It was an honor, and looking forward to, actually, I'll be going out to the Land Nav muster on the 28th. I've got a couple clients out there, and, for those who are still sticking around, I think that's the next one, correct?
Yeah. Yep. End of the month.
Yeah.
Couple tickets still available.
Awesome. Yeah. So if you guys want to come shoot the shit with me, or most importantly, learn how to do Land Nav at a high level, definitely not something to miss. And you're going to get great tutelage from that. I've been to a couple, and it's definitely highly worth the cost. Honestly, it's a steal in my opinion. So anyway, thanks for coming on, David. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.
All right, man.